she didn't make it. Good evening. My name is LaTanya Reeves, and I am the Vice Chair of the Community Commission on Police Oversight. I'll be leading tonight's meeting in the absence of our Chair, Commissioner Dito Swinton. Before we begin, I want to welcome all of those who are observing our meeting tonight, whether here in person or monitoring our meeting broadcast. I would like to have a moment of silence for Officer Jamal Mitchell, so if you all will indulge me, please have a moment of silence for Officer Mitchell. Thank you. Thank you for your service, sir. At this time, I'm going to call to order this regular meeting for Monday, July 8th, and ask the clerk to call the roll to verify the presence of a quorum.
Commissioner Lohr.
Present.
Commissioner Shanfield.
Present.
Commissioner Olson.
Present.
Commissioner Newman.
Present.
Commissioner Clement.
Present.
Commissioner Gurian Sherman.
Present.
Commissioner Peterson is absent. Commissioner Sturm.
Present.
Commissioner Vorpal is absent. Commissioner Williams Johnson.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Chair Dito Swinton is absent. Vice Chair Reeves.
Present.
There are 10 commissioners present.
Thank you. Let the record reflect we have a quorum. We'll now proceed to our agenda. If I may, I would like to make a motion to move public comment to the beginning of the meeting. With our rules that we will be working on in the next coming month, we'll have some additional language around public comment, but for this meeting, I would like to move it to the beginning of the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion. Commissioner Lohr, second. Thank you very much. Any discussion?
Yes,
Commissioner Gurney Sherman?
thank you. That's my discussion.
All right, thank you very much. If there's no further discussion, please call the roll.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, this is adopting the agenda with the change
Yes.
for public comments at the beginning?
Yes, thank you.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, I also just had two other questions.
Okay.
Where in the agenda are we going to discuss the proposed ordinance changes to CCPO? I know the city clerk was working on that. I wasn't sure if that's in the agenda, and if it's not, if we could also add that to the agenda. And also, if we, I think there are other places to talk about this, so I think I'm okay. Just where we would be discussing the ordinance.
Unfinished business? Is that your proposal, to put it there?
Yes, I think that's a good idea. Unfinished business would work.
All right, there's a motion to add that to the agenda. Is there a second for proposed ordinance changes?
Second.
Point of order, which thing are we voting on first?
We're voting on the amendment change, or excuse me, the agenda change for adding her motion to the agenda. Was that a second from Commissioner Lohr? All right, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, so the motion on the floor is to add ordinance changes to the agenda. Sir, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lohr.
Yes.
Commissioner Shanfield.
Yes.
Commissioner Olson.
Yes.
Commissioner Newman.
Yes.
Commissioner Clement.
Yes.
Commissioner Gurian Sherman.
Yes.
Commissioner Sturm.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Vice Chair Reeves.
Yes.
There are 10 ayes.
Thank you. Was there something else, Commissioner Gurney Sherman? Did you have something else?
No.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Commissioners, we also need to adopt the agenda in its entirety with that amendment.
So moved, Commissioner Smith.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Sir Clerk?
Commissioner Lohr.
Yes.
Commissioner Shanfield.
Yes.
Commissioner Olson.
Yes.
Commissioner Newman.
Yes.
Commissioner Clement.
Yes.
Commissioner Gurian Sherman.
I'm sorry to say this. I missed what we're voting on. I'm just having
The
a problem
agenda.
with my left hearing aid.
agenda
The vote
is-
before us is on the adoption of the entire agenda as amended.
Thank you. Yes.
Commissioner Sturm.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Vice Chair Reeves.
Yes.
There are 10 ayes.
Thank you. Commissioners, the agenda for this evening meeting is before us, so I'm glad, thank you for that adoption. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted as presented. Next, we have acceptance of 3 sets of minutes. First, the minutes of our regular meeting on May 13th. the minutes of our public hearing from May 21st and the minutes of our regular meeting on June 3rd, which was canceled due to a lack of quorum. May I have a motion and second to accept those 3 sets of minutes? Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. With the proper motion to accept those minutes, please call the roll.
I had one discussion item. This is a question for the city clerk. Both in the May 13th, 2024 minutes and the May 21st, 2024 minutes, there were written documents that are mentioned, and they are summarized, and I appreciate that. I believe it's only in one of the minutes where it says that you can get the attachments through the city clerk's office. I didn't see that in the May 13th minutes. And I'm wondering if in the future, if there are written documents that are provided during public comment, if not only can we say they're available at the city clerk's office, but if we can say if they're available online or what the exact procedure is to get the written documents. I did bring this up before and asked if they could be attached to the minutes and was told that this is not, because of uniformity, this isn't going to be allowed. But if somebody did want to see the attached documents, the way it's presented now is it looks like you have to walk into the city attorney's office. And I'm wondering if we could just, I'm sorry, the city clerk's office. And I'm wondering if we could just have some instructions or a link or something as to how you would get those documents.
Madam Chair, any documents that are submitted for the record are included with, and they are linked to the meeting agenda. We have the agenda before the meeting, and after the meeting, we post a marked agenda, which includes a link to the minutes, but it also includes anything submitted for the record. So resolutions that this body is proposing are always added to the marked agenda after the fact. And I know that we have a brief presentation I'm planning later in this meeting on limbs, a demonstration of limbs, and so that will maybe give a little bit more insight into how those documents are maintained.
Thank you.
Thank you. That answers my question. I have no further discussion.
All right. If there's no further discussion, we'll have a motion to approve the 3 sets of minutes. Discussion on the minutes is concluded, excuse me. Sir Clerk?
Commissioner Lohr?
Yes.
Commissioner Shanfield?
Yes.
Commissioner Olson?
Yes.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Commissioner Clement?
Yes.
Commissioner Gurian-Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Sturm?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams-Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chair Reeves?
Yes.
There are 10 ayes.
Thank you. The ayes have it, and those minutes have been accepted. So now we're going to have public comment. If you haven't had the opportunity, there is a sign-up sheet over here for public comment, and I'll wait to see if anyone has signed up as we've moved to the beginning of the agenda. Thank you so much. I apologize if I butcher your name. Is it Roxy Lynch? All right. You have 2 minutes. Please state your name and your ward.
My name is Roxy Lynch. I live in the 9th Ward. I'm a resident of South Minneapolis. I grew up in Brooklyn Park, and I have loved the city of Minneapolis my whole life. I've lived now 23 years in South Minneapolis. The procrastination in getting a good contract for the MPD, to me, shows a lack of concern for our city and the restoration of it, because our wonderful city cannot be restored without a strong police department. And we cannot attract more residents and businesses without that, without making the city safe again with a strong police department. We cannot attract quality officers without competitive pay for the risk. Frankly, this contract is not near enough, as it'll be, not even get them close to being the highest paid in the state, especially in the next couple years as other cities get their raises. But for now, this contract is what's needed to keep the officers we have and to attract more to come to Minneapolis. I know many of the officers, and I've asked many of them, why did you become an officer? And many of them, most of them say, because I wanted to help people, to do good, to make the city better. Almost all my neighbors want our officers to be taken care of and paid higher than any other city in this state. And we should take pride in having them paid higher than any other department in this state for the risk. And when I say risk, it's not just the individuals, but their families. We had, my brother-in-law was a 32-year veteran, and His daughter shared with us one time that her whole life, she never slept until 3-something in the morning when her dad came home, and she knew he was alive and safe. Again, I don't believe this contract is not enough, but it's what's needed for now to be approved right away. I'm asking each of you to care about our city, and please pass this contract. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Dave Bicking.
Thank you for moving up. I'm Dave Bicking, Ward 8. Thank you for moving up the comments on the agenda, but because it was at the end, I wasn't quite prepared to be speaking yet. I sent you an email about the item on the agenda, electing the chair and vice chair, and I see that the agenda was not changed to remove that item. And I think that is very, very concerning, that it should not be having an election like this with the old commissioners instead of the new commissioners who will be working with the new chair and vice chair. So I urge you to take that off the agenda for tonight and wait until, the new people are here. There are some people here who are being reappointed, but they don't even know for sure if they're being reappointed. So this is highly, highly inappropriate. The problem is, of course, that the staff has not gotten around to appointing people for this commission, which, again, is another way in which they blocked you. Also, the approval of the bylaws, I think there's still issues with that. I understand that those are going to be approved or are being proposed to be approved as is, and that maybe we can change them later. I think it's better to change it and do it right to begin with. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is it Andrew Cluse?
Gleiss.
Excuse me.
That's why you should just put Andrew.
Okay.
Hi. On the May 13th meeting, there was discussion about taking verbatim minutes of public comments. The response there was that verbatim minutes were not taken for any group, but because of the videos, Mr. Olson, you pointed out that because of the videos, you can go back and see everything that anyone wants to. The clerk stated that the videos were going to be available, that the links might break after some time. They weren't kept in perpetuity, but they were kept for a number of years and then destroyed based on a retention schedule. So I went looking for the past videos. There are no videos of the meetings from July 10th and further. That is less than a year. Is that a mistake, or do you guys actually have a less than a year retention policy for the videos? And I found those links on the marked agenda. The second piece is, I've looked on the marked agenda for the attachments for the document that I presented on the March 13th meeting, and I can't find it anywhere on there. So if it's supposed to be attached to the meeting minutes or marked agenda as stated, it's not happening. But I do see on the marked agenda that it does say that all documents and comments are public record, so there should be an easy way to be getting to that material. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Chuck Turchik.
Chuck Turchik, Ward 6. Madam Chair and Commissioners, thank you for moving public comment to the beginning of the meeting. I think it only makes sense so that people can make public comments about things that you're going to decide during the meeting instead of before the decisions are made, instead of afterwards. I think it makes eminently good sense. This way, you'll probably be getting fewer emails from me, and I know you'll appreciate that, for heaven's sakes. I am less concerned than Mr. Bicking is about you voting for a chair and vice chair. On Wednesday's meeting of the Public Health and Safety Committee, on the agenda are the new nominees to be appointed to this commission, and all of the people who are on the commission and reapplied did get nominated for appointment. I think there are 2 new people on that list of nominees. the two people filling the two slots where members retired. I have sent emails with some allusions to the value of public comment, and I've referred a couple of times to the Behavioral Crisis Response Program. That was initiated by public comment in November of 2015 when a woman named Kathy Zeck made a proposal for a co-responder program to the PCOC. And a month later, they adopted a research and study program. 6 months later, they adopted a full report, recommending that the city adopt a co-responder pilot program, which the city did, and then later expanded, and eventually that morphed into the Behavioral Crisis Response Program, which everyone now loves, including police officers. And Kathy Zeck, in her public comment at that initial meeting, went on for about 5 or 10 minutes even, because the PCOC commissioners were asking her questions. That's the value of public comment.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close public comment. The next order of business is the election of a chair and vice chair for the next year, as provided in our enabling ordinance. I'm going to turn this portion of the meeting over to the city clerk to administer the election for our officers. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Madam Chair, as provided under Section 172.60H1 of the enabling ordinance for this body, the commission must select a chair and a vice chair from its members. The ordinance itself does not provide for a set term. However, the bylaws, which has been noted are presented for formal consideration later in this evening, would provide that these officers be elected each year at the regular meeting following the board's organizational meeting. This body's organizational meeting was conducted in May of 2023. Thus, the time for reorganizing would be either May or June of this year under those proposed bylaws. I'll note we're in a bit of a different situation here because of two factors. First and most important, the current chair, Commissioner Dido Swinton, has indicated she is resigning her seat and will not be accepting reappointment. Therefore, that seat is vacant, pending a new appointment by the mayor and city council, and until a new chair is chosen by vote of this body, the vice chair assumes those duties of the chair under the ordinance as acting chair, but not chair. Second, the bylaws have not yet been adopted. As I noted, it's an action for later in this meeting, so technically those provisions are not yet applicable. However, the commission has been in operation for more than a year at this point. Half of the body's members are up for reappointment under the terms of the initial appointments that were made to establish the commission, and we do expect that those will be made in the next council cycle or two. As Mr. Turchik noted, several of them, at least half of the current vacant seats, are already on the agenda for this cycle to be considered by the Public Health and Safety Committee and the full council next Thursday. I understand there may be concern about proceeding with the election while some of those seats are not yet filled for a full term, but if you do the calculus, 7 members of the current body are running for terms through the end of next year. 4 of the current members, the 8 seats that are up for reappointment, are going to be reappointed. That's a total of 11 of the 15 seats will be back for the rest of this year, for all of next year, so that doesn't change the quorum of the body. It probably doesn't change much of the vote. So if the body wishes, we can then proceed to the election of a chair and vice chair tonight. If not, we certainly would take up the election of officers at the next regular meeting, assuming that we do adopt the bylaws tonight and they would become effective, that we would need to elect a chair. So I first would pose the question to the body if the body is ready to move to the election of chair and vice chair tonight.
Is there any comments on that discussion? Commissioner Gurran-Sherman?
I think the point raised by Mr. Bicking at public comment is something that is worth us considering. I do appreciate what the clerk has said, that 11 of the 15 members of the current commission will be back no matter what happens with the appointments. I just don't think it's a precedent, though, that we should be setting where we elect chair and vice chair before we have newly appointed members. I'm willing to be persuaded against that this would be a one-time move, but I don't think it's a good precedent. If we have, at the next time that there are vacancies, whether because people are ending their terms, are not going to be reappointed, or people step down, and we have 4 of the 15 returning, and we decide to elect a chair and a vice chair, I think we would all agree that that is not something we would want to do. So I think we have to be very careful about the precedent we're setting, and I think we have to be on the record as saying that we are not setting a precedent, and that because we want the work of the commission to go forward, that was certainly, if not one of the biggest comment at the May 21st public hearing. It certainly was at the top that we need to move forward, and I do believe strongly that we need to have a chair and a vice chair in place in order to do that. So I'm not saying that I'm going to vote against doing the elections. I just think I would hope that we could say and agree on the record that we are not setting a precedent.
Okay. Any further discussion?
With that, Madam Chair, then we'll proceed to the election of chair and vice chair. Let me first outline the
We had a
election
couple
process.
comments. Oh, sorry, there was more.
Commissioner Shanfield?
Sure, thank you. The wondering I had is this all or nothing? Is there a world in which we might say there's an interim appointment from now until once everyone is seated? I'm just thinking of, are there other ways around what's on the table to be voted on so that we can meet people's needs?
Mr. Clerk?
There's nothing on the table to be voted on right now. The proposal is to elect officers, which you're required to do under the ordinance. Do you have to do it tonight? No. You don't have a chair. You have an acting chair, and you can leave the vice chair as the acting chair pending the appointment. I'll note, not to set a precedent, but we can never predict into the future. The bylaws would require us to have officers elected every May or June, and that would be set, whether there's a full slate of appointments or not. I don't control the appointments process, notwithstanding a comment about staff aren't doing the appointments. Those are made by the mayor and council, and they will move at their own pace, no matter how much I prompt. So I can't guarantee that we will have all 15 seats filled every May when we go to do elections. But it is, I think, more standard to say this body will do its elections of officers at its May meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? Commissioner Sturm?
Yeah, I would just say I'm good with either decision the body wants to make, but I don't see that much value in waiting because if we wait till next month, it's not like they're going to have the new people by next month anyway. So either way is fine with me. I just don't see the utility in it.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Smith?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, it's my understanding that the council may well act in the July meeting cycle to reappoint. So I think it's very possible we would have full membership at our August meeting. I am perfectly fine with going ahead with the election, but I also think we will have at least 2 new commissioners. And one of the messages I would like to send to them is please engage, please participate fully. And they might get that message even better if we waited for them for the officer elections.
Thank you.
And meanwhile, our current vice chair can act as the chair.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Lohr?
I'd like to move that we do a vote as to whether or not to elect the chair and vice chair this evening or to table it for next month.
Which one?
Let's vote on election for tonight.
Okay.
It'd be best if we phrase that in an affirmative. So are you suggesting your motion is let's proceed with the election or let's postpone the election?
Let's postpone.
So the motion is to postpone.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion to postpone?
This is a clarification question
Okay.
about
Commissioner
the
Shanfield?
motion. Is that appropriate now?
Yes.
The motion, I'm sorry, I'm just losing my train of thought.
The motion is to postpone for 1 month to our next regular
Yes,
meeting.
thank you.
And for Vice Chair Reeves to stand as interim in the role of temporary chair until that time.
Thank you, just, that helped. So if that's the case, then what happens if you're not able to come to the August meeting? So who would be your backup is my real question in the temporary.
Good question.
Then the body would have to select an acting chair from amongst the remaining members, assuming you had a quorum.
Who's showing up?
Okay. Any further discussion before the motion's officially stated again? Commissioner Gurney Sherman?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really appreciate the comment of Commissioner Smith. I hadn't thought of that. I did want to say that on the public health and safety agenda, it does say that all the actions that are taken at that meeting in 2 days on the 10th will go to the City Council on July 18th. So I think there's a very good chance that on the 18th, the 6 people that are nominated will in fact be approved, and probably unanimously so, and so they would be available at the August meeting.
And just to confirm, 4 of the 6 are already here.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Commissioner Lohr, would you restate your motion, please?
Motion to postpone the election of chair and vice chair for 1 month to our next regular public meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lohr?
Yes.
Commissioner Shanfield?
Yes.
Commissioner Olson?
Yes.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Commissioner Clement?
Yes.
Commissioner Gurian Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Stern?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams-Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chair Reeves?
Yes.
There are 10 ayes.
All right, thank you. All right. I'm just going through my paperwork here. Hold on just 1 second. The next order of business is for discussion as Chair Commissioner Duda Swinton has included the meeting norms that she made a practice of reading at the start of each meeting. So those meeting norms are included in the agenda packet as usual, and I'll take a moment to review those now. Our meeting norms are the standard for working together positively and productively as a group, and they provide a guideline for our individual and collective behavior. Meeting materials will be shared on time. Suggested agenda items will be shared in advance of meetings. Read any shared materials prior to meeting. Participate in discussion. Ask questions for understanding. Implement time limits on presentations, discussions, etc. Respect opinion of other commissioners. Abide by decisions of the commission. Avoid personal comments. Speak one at a time and when recognized. Be concise. And notify the chair when a meeting or training absence is necessary. Next, we've included in your packets a copy of a letter that was submitted on behalf of the CCPO to the City Council's Public Health and Safety Committee. That committee's chair, Councilmember Chavez, had originally requested an update on our work as a commission to be made at the commission's July 10th meeting. However, he then changed that date and asked for that presentation at the committee's meeting on June 20th. Because the chair and I both could not accommodate that change, we worked with the city clerk to offer a letter on behalf of the commission that could be submitted to the city council. A copy of that letter has been included in the agenda packet to share with all commissioners. I would also share that despite the rescheduling, that presentation was ultimately postponed and not given at the committee's June 20th meeting. That presentation was postponed to the committee's July 10th meeting as originally planned. So that is this Wednesday starting at 1:30 p.m. in this chamber. The city clerk and staff will be providing a brief synopsis of the first year of the commission's operation as requested by Councilmember Chavez. There is no action required on this item, but we did want to share with all commissioners. If there are any questions, I can take those or direct them to the city clerk. Okay. All right, thank you. I'll direct the clerk to receive and file that report.
I'd like to be recognized.
Commissioner Gurian Sherman?
Thank you. I would like to propose a motion that we adopt, if not tonight, that we make a point to do it next in the August meeting, norms for how we are going to conduct ourselves with the public. I was told about a very disturbing incident that occurred right after the public meeting on May 21st, in which a commissioner went to a member of the public who had made public comments and disparaged me personally. I don't think this is the way we want to operate. I think that we need to make sure that when we are acting in our capacity, whether it's before, during, or after a meeting, whether it's on email, that we are respecting the fact that people are coming like we are as volunteers, and they don't want to be told that a certain commissioner is getting in the way, and making a member of the public feel that they have to bring a message to me or anybody else that we're supposed to get on board. I think that we are better than that, and I do believe that we need to adopt norms that guide our work, not only during the meeting, but before, after, and willing to have a discussion on whether it would be appropriate, if people would be amenable to having a motion brought with more thought to it at the August meeting. And if so, I would go ahead and draft some norms that would be pertinent to how we conduct ourselves before and after meetings and in our official capacities, rather than take time up for it tonight, because it's new and I would like people to have time to think about it. The second thing is, I do want to comment on, I think it was very rushed to have to bring that letter of a first-year status report. We've had a lot that went on, and a lot was not in that letter. And I'm not criticizing the chair and the vice chair. It literally had to be done, from what I understand, like the night before. But I do think we need to have the opportunity to amend that letter and to be honest about what we did not accomplish, but also what we did accomplish. I think that a good, almost half of the letter is boilerplate about the adoption of the commission, and it just took up a lot of space, and I understand that. But again, I think we really need to make sure this is a public record. That status report looks like we are trying to avoid some of the problems that we had, or not the problems, the obstacles. And I think if we're going to be honest, we want to make sure that's out in public. I think we did ourselves an enormous service tonight. We listened to the people on May 21st. We put public comment at the beginning of the agenda. It may seem like a small thing, but it's a way of building trust. And I think we have to continue that, and two ways to do that are to adopt norms about how we conduct ourselves as commissioners before and after and in our capacity, and also amending that status report to reflect more of some of the things that we learned and some of the things that we're planning to do going forward in much more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first point about the CCPO norms from the community, perhaps you want to bring some language to the August meeting so we can at least discuss it. Yes. That may be helpful. And to the second point about the letter that the chair and I submitted, Mr. Clerk, did you want to address any comments regarding how that letter got to the council?
Madam Chair, no, I don't need to add any more detail about that. I think that the summary you provided was sufficient. There was a short amount of time for us to accommodate a requested change, and did the best we could to offer something on the public record on behalf of the entire body. That was, I guess, a fair and balanced reflection of a year, the first year of a brand new body getting organized. So offered that on behalf of this body at that meeting. Unfortunately, time ran out. We weren't able to give it, and it was rescheduled to the regular meeting this coming Wednesday. So appreciate the feedback that was given. I also would just note on the meeting norms proposal 2, I think everyone here has been told, because this body is new and because it is high profile, we have, as a city administration, used it for bringing forward several reforms that the mayor and the council adopted unanimously for all city boards and commissions. That includes the bylaws that we're going to discuss tonight, and also meeting rules. And there's another piece that was approved as part of the reforms by council, which is called a participant agreement. And that participant agreement outlines the city's expectations for how individuals appointed to boards operate, how you behave. And so rather than create something brand new, it might be good for this body, since it's been on the leading edge on the other reforms. I'm happy to share that. I will be making a presentation about board and commission reforms more broadly for all boards and commissions to the Committee of the Whole this cycle, which is not this week, it's next week, Tuesday. And so would just suggest that maybe Commissioner Gurry and Sherman, as usual, is a few steps ahead of us, and that we are anticipating a lot of those things that she's brought forward. So just offered that for thought.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. If there's nothing else, I'll ask the clerk to receive and file that report. Thank you. The next item is discussion about the updated policy review process. My understanding is that the commissioners won the chance to discuss the existing MPD policy review process and the role of the CCPO in that process. I'll note that we had a brief discussion about this at our April meeting in response to a report from MPD Commander Wilkes. I don't believe anyone at our meeting tonight prepared to address this issue. I'll ask the city clerk, is there anyone here to address that?
Madam Chair, no, and I'll make this sort of general observation as we go through the next several items and other items on the agenda tonight, and an opportunity for us to continue improving this body's operations going forward with the election of new leadership. As you know, my office took over administrative support in March of this year, so we haven't had a lot of time working together, but one of the things that we do for all of the other bodies we support, council committees, and others, is having a deadline for agenda items to be submitted well in advance of the actual meeting, so there's time for the internal vetting and review processes. Currently, with the CCPO, what that process looks like on the internal for staff is we're getting from the chair the various work group reports and other items that individual commissioners might want to bring up, usually about 24 to 48 hours before we're required to post the agenda. So there is no time for staff to respond. And unfortunately, I think what that looks like then is staff are slowing you down. We just don't have the time to do the professional work we need to do. And so going forward, we need to change those deadlines so that the staff are able to help. This is an example, one of many on tonight's agenda and probably in previous months, where we literally were told that this was a request and it came in on Tuesday before July 4th. Many people were on vacation last week, and there was not time to find someone to speak to this. So certainly the body can have a discussion as it wishes tonight, if that's the pleasure of the body, but I think if there's some kind of a formal direction, it would need to wait until the next meeting so that staff have a chance to respond and prepare appropriately.
Okay, thank you. So we won't have the staff to
Chair.
present.
Here.
Yes, Commissioner Olson.
Maybe I could add a little more context. I recognize items 6, 7, 8, and 9 as coming out of an email that I wrote to the chair after our training session with NACOL, and I suggested to the chair that at some point in the future, these items would be worth discussing with the commission as a whole. And in the rush with the chair leaving and the deadlines and so forth, they were proposed as formal agenda items. And if I could just explain a little bit what my thought was on those 4 items, I don't think anybody would be prepared to make any formal decisions or anything, but just what these kind of things that we can work on in future meetings and put on the agenda for full discussion and get the assistance of our support groups. Number 6, updating the policy review process. That's been an ongoing discussion, and we need to figure out how our work and our responsibility as reviewing police policy meshes with other legal obligations to review police policy. We just need to figure out a process for policy review.
Okay.
Item 7, improving the CCPO's communication with the public. During the NACOL training, it occurred to me that it would be really valuable to have a more robust CCPO website, a social media presence, other ways that we can actually get the word out to the public, what we're doing and what we're considering and what we're actually accomplishing on occasion. Number 8, reviewing the review panel process. We're talking a little bit about review panels, and I've felt that we don't have much of a feedback loop among panelists on how the review panel process is going, how we can work better with the sworn personnel on those panels, and how we can be more efficient in the review panel process. So that's something that people can think about, and we can move forward in the future. And number 9, involvement in the Chief of Police's performance review process. We're required to do that, but we don't really have a mechanism for that. We haven't been invited to do it yet, but sometime in the future we need to get a handle on that and figure out how that can happen.
Thank you.
That's an explanation. I hope it didn't waste everybody's time.
Much appreciated. If there is no objection, I'll just ask the city clerk to coordinate with the appropriate staff to bring back this presentation for all 6, 7, 8, and 9 at our next regular meeting, which is set for August 5th. Commissioner Stanfield?
Could I add to number 6?
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. That was really helpful. Mr. Fussy sent a great email earlier today, and because it was today, I'm not sure if everyone has had a chance to read it. So I'd like to offer and invite you to just share sort of the bullet points here of what you laid out, because it was really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. As your fellow commissioner just noted, I was able to send out an email this morning in which I copied all of you along with some other staff. It was in response to some of the recent questions that had arisen regarding the policy review function of this commission and how that relates to the separate and distinct policy review function that is provided for under the terms of the MDHR settlement, and kind of how maybe they are distinct in a large component, but possibly there's some room to work together on those. So I would invite you to review that, and certainly, as the commissioners have said, we can discuss further possibly at future meetings. Essentially, I would say, and it was a process of working with my office and talking to members of the my office's implementation team. I know they're very eager to get or to facilitate this commission being able to make comments regarding proposed police policies. I don't know if there's a magic formula out there for how that might happen, but I think what the main components of that analysis ended up being was that the distinct factor that I was talking about is that under the MDHR settlement, there's a 45-day public comment window. And then the function of that process is to have those policies submitted for review to the ALIFA team and eventually implemented. That's sort of distinct from the ordinance provision, which the commission enjoys, which is a 100-day period to provide comment and feedback to the public. It is not if you look at the wording, it is not a provision that provides feedback or any approval to the MPD itself, although from what I understand, the MPD certainly wants to hear comments from this commission, and if there is a way to facilitate that, I think they are eager to do so. And so the other theme is that, according to the law that is out there, the settlement agreement is going to control over the ordinance to the extent that there is any direct conflict. I don't think there's necessarily direct conflict between the two provisions, but there certainly might be some in terms of there is no function of this commission to approve police policies. There's simply a report out to the public regarding recommendations on those policies, and you are charged with doing that within a 120-day period. There's nothing that prevents you from trying to exercise that function on a quicker basis. The ordinance also allows you to schedule special meetings above and beyond. Well, right now, I think you've adopted a monthly 12-meeting schedule, although the ordinance only requires you to have 8 meetings per year, but it also empowers you to have additional meetings as necessary. So that's one component I think that could be looked at. Another one that the implementation team looked at is certainly, individual commissioners could submit comments. Obviously, you can't speak on behalf of the entire commission, but you would certainly be able to submit your own comments as an individual commissioner within that 45-day window. And so there are, I guess, different approaches that could be taken, but I would encourage you to review that email that was sent out, and certainly it can be a subject matter for additional discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Stanfield?
Thank you so much, Mr. Fussy. It's really helpful. And I think the question on the table right now that's urgent is, how do we want to handle the policy review, the 45-day window, because it closes on July 21st, which is before our next meeting. I'm seeing head shaking like other people were thinking the same. So I would invite some discussion on that. As the chair of the Policy Review Committee, we're happy, or subgroup, I don't want to make that confusion, happy to offer our horsepower to do some of that legwork and bring something back to the August meeting if that's helpful. Can we talk about that right now?
Any discussion? Commissioner Smith?
Madam Chair, in response to Commissioner Schonfield, I think items 6 and 7 really interrelate, and having our work groups, community engagement and policy and research, really develop some concrete recommendations for the protocol or the process for policy review and how we engage the public in that process is really critical. I don't know how we'll get that all figured out by July 21st. So there's an immediate need that maybe there's a way the work group can address. But I do think for our August meeting, not only should we look to the city clerk's office to provide background material, but I think our community engagement work group should be thinking about how we can engage the public in this policy review process and integrate that with the recommendations of the policy and research group.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Green-Sherman?
First, I want to just thank Commissioner Olson. I really appreciate knowing why this was on the agenda. I was glad to see it, but your explanation is wonderful, and I really appreciate the initiative that you took so that we can use this meeting to discuss. I think we're on the same page. Everybody, even though it did get a little tense and it was a little hot sometimes at the NACOL training, it was remarkable. I think everybody who was there had a unanimous opinion that we were very glad that we spent the day there from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and had such an excellent training. The facilitator from NACOL is a woman who got her PhD from the University of Minnesota. She was here for 4 years and knows the territory. So, and she got her PhD in social work. So she definitely presented us with a different perspective on how to be effective as a commission. And I really appreciated it. We did talk at the end about trying to get more technical assistance. And since then, I've done some research, and part of it, frankly, has been looking at the ALIFA website. They certainly have a lot of skills doing what they do. And I went back and looked at the MDHR consent decree, and there are plenty of sections that provide that ALIFA can provide technical assistance. So not only do we have another 15 hours that we may be able to use with NACOL, but there are many more hours and many more trainings that I believe ALIFA can provide to us. But because we are an independent body and they are an independent consultant, I think what we would need to do at the August meeting, if we wanted to go forward with asking ALIFA to intervene and provide us with some guidance on policy, communication, discipline review panels, I believe they would be open to it, and I think we would just have to submit a formal motion requesting that they come in. And I think we should discuss more of what we would like to see, but I think that's a worthwhile way of going, that we need more trainings. It's not just a matter of how much we have on our plate, it's how little time we have. We meet once a month, we have work groups that meet once a month, and so the idea is, how do we continue to staff review panels and also do all the policy work? And again, I will send it out. I thought it was really fascinating to go back and look at the chronology. The findings report was done by MDHR at a time where we were, the city was already involved in creating this commission. So the timeline is really significant. April 27th, 2022, we had the MDHR finding report. And then less than 4 months later, the then president of the council started on August 18th, the ordinance changes that would create our commission. And by December, whether you agreed with it or not, we became an entity, and we started to, we were functioning as of April. A month before that, the city and the city clerk, and the city attorney signed the MDHR consent decree. So if you look at and I went back and looked at some of the city council meetings as they debated this ordinance, they knew full well that the MDHR findings report was on the table. They were trying to be proactive. It says in that report, we want the city to be proactive. And if you look at the ordinance, and then you look at the MDHR consent decree or the settlement agreement, they knew that an ordinance creating us had been passed. So there's a lot of language that is very complimentary, and if we end up with an impasse like 120 days and 45 days, there is actually provisions for dealing with that. I just think we are in an excellent position to have a wonderful, very highly skilled independent evaluator, and I would like to offer that at next month's meeting, I'm happy to draft a proposal, draft a motion that would officially ask ALIFA to give us as a commission technical assistance. And if there's agreement around that, I will prepare that for the August meeting. I think we're all on the same page that we want to do all we can, but we want to know how to do it efficiently.
Just to confirm, Commissioner, are you stating a motion, or are you just saying you would like to bring a motion forward at the next meeting?
No, I'm just trying to get a feeling of the room, that I would bring a motion, and if there's any ideas other than what we talked about, people talked about communications, they talked about the different powers that we have, we've talked about discipline and the review panels, and we don't have the feedback loop. I think all of these things are things that ALIFA, if they can't provide the technical assistance, they know who would. Maybe they know people at NACOL. So no, it would be to bring a motion for August for us to continue, to consider.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Perhaps just to help organize this, it would, I think, be helpful if we took the 4 items, and I want to echo appreciation to Commissioner Olson for explaining how the items came. I wasn't clear. And so I think it would be helpful perhaps to refer these to specific work groups. It'd be helpful to have those work groups meet soon, within the next week or two, so that we have ample time to prepare motions and materials in advance of the next meeting in August. What I heard is perhaps items 6 and 7 would be jointly referred to the policy research and the community engagement work groups. I think, certainly subject to the body's decision, that number 8 would go to also the policy and research work group. And I think the 9th one on the performance review would be to the governance work group. And it feels like that gives each of those work groups some meaty topics to weigh in on in advance of the next meeting, and as Commissioner Gurry and Sherman suggested, possibly working to draft up motions that would dispose of that effort and move that work forward.
Commissioner Sturm?
I was just going to recommend, while we're trying to get some bigger things in motion for the oncoming chair, we have access to the SharePoint site that the chief has done a lot of actions already, and we haven't said anything about it. And I believe operationally, keeping things simple is better than increasing complexity. So, I mean, the next meeting, we can start reviewing these special orders and policy changes, just not offering recommendations on them, but just going over them so we're all aware of it and the public is aware of it. Because there's like obscure stuff in there as well it's good stuff to know, like the police are no longer reselling firearms, they're destroying firearms that have been decommissioned. So just stuff like that is good to cover. And it doesn't have to be this big complicated ordeal to cover that simple stuff.
Noted. Thank you very much. Commissioner Gurry and Sherman, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. With all due respect, I reject that these should be sent to the work groups. I think part of our problem is we don't even know what's involved in providing a recommendation for the chief of police. It could be masses of material. I would prefer to go to ALIFA and get an idea of which one of these under our powers makes sense. I didn't send an email to the chair, but one of the things I would like to be doing is under number 2 under our powers, collect, review, and audit summary data and compile aggregate statistics related to complaints of police officer misconduct. I have no idea how to go about doing that any more than I know how to go about doing 6, 7, or 8, or 9. I would prefer that we do this in an orderly way. We get some idea of what is involved in each of these. We have 8 enumerated powers under Section L of our statute powers. Some of these are under there, but I don't think I'm prepared to make a decision about which one has a priority. I think what we need to do is to get an idea from NACOL, from ALIFA, how do we take these powers and determine what is a priority for us as a commission, what is a priority for us as a city, and what is a priority for what is going on with the consent decree. So I don't think we're at a point by just putting this over to a work group where none of us, just because we're in a smaller group, can figure this out. I think we need to do this methodically, try to get some training under our belt. ALIFA is on board, and hopefully they would be able to provide us training very quickly once they get a request from us.
Mr. Clerk, may I offer, I think it's helpful to go to the committees or the work groups, but perhaps the appropriate staff that would help govern some of this information can have a conversation with the chairs of the work groups to give them direction, and that's a place that we start. Because I know that city staff may have more information, but I think it needs to go somewhere, and input from the work group chairs, and the work groups themselves can also have some input on this, but then the staff that's appropriate to that item can talk at the committee level. Is that agreeable with everyone? Commissioner Gurney-Sherman.
It is not agreeable to me. It's as if we are saying that we are going to adopt the involvement in the chief of police performance review as something under the powers when we haven't considered all the powers as a whole. I don't know if that's the best use of our time. When is the next chief of police performance review due? Why would we undertake that when, as Commissioner Olson said, we don't have a feedback loop on all of the review panels that we've done? Isn't that a bigger priority than the chief of police review? I'm not saying that it's not something we shouldn't do, but if you already had a performance review and it's not due for another year or two, then why are we taking that on? There are 8 different powers under the ordinance, and we have to decide which ones are going to be our priority and what we want to tackle before we send them to work groups to try to deal with the substantive work that's involved with that. And sending them to disparate work groups, again, that is not done in the public, and not all of us are there, is not going to help us determine which one of those 8 powers we are going to undertake. I disagree with taking on the performance of the police chief at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner, are you making a motion or just continuing discussion?
I'm making a motion that instead of sending these to work groups, that we go ahead and at the next meeting, put out a motion to a request. We review a motion to request the services of ALIFA so that they can help us determine how we go about doing those powers. So my motion is not to send any of these items to work groups at this meeting, and to first go ahead and see what ALIFA can provide us in determining which one of these are our biggest priority.
Is there a second to this motion?
I second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes,
Commissioner Olson?
Excuse me. I value the advice of experts in these areas. I don't think it is efficient to send it out to people that we have no control over and hope they have time to do something to advise us before we do anything. I think the appropriate place to start working on these issues is with the commissioners doing work and within the work groups. So I would prefer that method.
Thank you. Commissioner Shanfield?
Yeah, I would agree with that, Commissioner Olson. And Commissioner Gurney-Sherman, I really value the thought and the effort that you have gone to look and see where we could also get some other training. And you mentioned the 15 hours of technical assistance that we learned about at the NACOL training that NACOL is providing to the city and including to us. Is that right?
I'm sorry. Yes, that
the 15 hours.
We would build on that.
Yeah. So can we think about together now, and maybe we can ask Director Amini as well, what is the next step to get that technical assistance support immediately because it's already been paid for?
Exactly.
Commissioner Lohr?
I just want to note that I don't think considering these items in our work groups precludes us also asking help from ALIFA. I think these are not mutually exclusive and they're being presented as such. I think personally I support both.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Commissioner Sturm.
Just offer the personal observation that we often get into this circle where we say we're not doing anything, and then we come up with 11 reasons why we can't do something. And it's, people can see it out there, and we can see it within the commission, that we keep doing this pin the tail on the donkey circle between why aren't we doing anything, and here's the 10 reasons why we can't do it. And we have our powers under the ordinance. We can start doing whatever we want to do under that ordinance, and we don't need permission from anybody else to start doing the work. We can get advice, but we are also commissioners appointed with our own experiences and our own knowledge to start doing the work, and we don't have to rely so much on everybody else, and they're all busy too.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right. Commissioner Green Sherman.
Well, then if we're going to send out selected of the 8 powers, then I think we should go through the list in the ordinance and send them all out. Let's just completely burden ourselves with not knowing what we're doing and start going down a path that we don't know how to deal with all this. So I say let's go ahead and do it. Let's. Where are we going to send the request for programs of research and study, including requesting complaint, investigation, and disciplinary records anonymized, so that we can ensure that police services are delivered in a lawful, effective, and a non-discriminatory way? Which work group is going to get that? And I already talked about collecting and reviewing audit data. What about making recommendations to the city council, the mayor, and chief of police related to police department practices, internal controls, and collective bargaining agreements? Where are we going to send that one? How about recommending training to MPD as a result of research and study that we recommend to MPD? And then how about creating and implementing a community outreach program? We're already discussing that in the community outreach, so I guess we're going to just continue with that. Number 6 is already the performance review of the chief. Number 7 is recommend clear, detailed processes for complaint investigations that build in safeguards against community members who are vulnerable to retaliation. And the last one is recommend policies that protect against retaliation for police officers who may fall under the category of whistleblowers or are vulnerable to retaliation. I don't think sending this out to the work groups is going to give us any more knowledge of how we actually start and grapple with this. But if we're going to do it for the recommendation for the police chief's review, then we should do it for all 7 of them. Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion's on the floor. There's no further discussion. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll on the motion.
Commissioner Lohr.
I'm sorry, which motion?
The motion is essentially to do nothing, but to wait for a motion next month at the meeting to come forward with recommendations.
No.
I object to that characterization. It is not to do nothing. It is to do something. It is to become informed. It is so that we can grapple with these big policy tasks that we have been tasked with and have not been able to get our arms around for the last year. So the characterization that we're doing nothing, that my motion is to do nothing, is taken with offense.
I'm sorry, I thought the motion was to wait until next month to consider a motion at that time on consulting.
But it is not to do nothing, Mr. City Clerk. That is an unbelievably crass and negative characterization.
Not my intent, Commissioner, but there was no action taken with your motion for right now. There's no immediate action for the body to take. It is to wait until a motion is brought forward at the next month's meeting. Is that a better characterization?
The characterization is to move to have consideration of the ALIFA, of a request to ALIFA to get technical assistance on deciding the priorities under the powers and other mandates in the ordinance, and to not send these to the work groups until we have some guidance about how that priority is set and how that work would be done.
Commissioner Green Sherman, I would ask that you state the motion as you would like it, because it's been reworded a couple of times, so please just state the motion.
Can I make a point of order?
Yes.
I don't know if it's allowed to make a motion to make a motion.
Commissioner Green Sherman.
Am I being asked, is it allowed to?
I want you to just restate your motion so we're all clear, because it's been restated a couple of times. So
the motion is to have at the August meeting that we will review a motion to request technical assistance to ALIFA
So
so
I would-
that we better know how to set our priorities under the power section of the ordinance and other mandates so that we can be effective in that work.
Okay, thank you. So I would ask that if your motion is to do a motion next month, because part of your motion was addressing the work groups, and you didn't restate that, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. So can we have your motion that you just stated?
Madam
Can that be
Chair.
brought up at the August meeting?
Madam Chair,
Well
in
taken.
fairness to Guri and Sherman, she did not recommend that things be referred to work groups. I had proposed that.
This
That wasn't a
cannot be referred
that
to
wasn't a
work groups.
motion. Her motion was much different.
So this is the motion I'm making. The motion is to, and I withdraw my motion and make a new motion. The motion is to set aside assigning the 8 powers out to work groups, and instead make sure that, have at the August meeting, a motion that we will work on to request formal technical assistance from ALIFA so that we know how to prioritize and take on the work under the power section of the ordinance and other mandates in the ordinance. So it's a 2-part motion, not to send the powers, any of the powers, to the work groups and wait until we can get some technical assistance from ALIFA. That's how I would summarize it.
Okay.
Thank you. Is
May
there a
I
sec-
restate that, just so we're clear? I have captured that as moving to not send any powers of the ordinance to work groups and to consider a motion at the next regular meeting in August to request technical assistance from ALIFA so that the commission can better understand how to set priorities under the power section of its ordinance and other mandates to get effective advice in conducting its work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there a second?
I was hoping that there's some further discussion to Commissioner Sturm's point.
Let's second the motion, just so we have it seconded. Is there a second? If there is going to be a second. And then we can
There
do
was a
discussion.
second. Commissioner Williams-Johnson seconded that motion.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then Commissioner Shanfield.
Why do we have to wait until August? Can't we make that motion now?
I think we can. I don't know exactly what it would say, though. I don't know, we haven't put anything in writing, and it's 7:10. I mean, certainly could put out a draft so that we can circulate it without commenting on it, and so that we would have it on the agenda in August. I don't know exactly what the motion would have to say. I think we have to find out and kind of do a little research on that. I haven't done that.
I wonder if one way we could do this, tell me if this is not too informal, but we might just say, let's pick one of us to follow up with ALIFA between now and the next meeting and ask them what's possible. I could make a motion to do that.
I don't know, I think we should just do the motion. I don't know if we have to, I think we just have to get it together. There isn't anything in writing, and I think we have to be able to say the kind of technical assistance that we're looking for, and I think we have to show to ALIFA how we justify it. I think we're going to have to put in sections of our ordinance. I think we're going to have to put sections in of the consent decree. I'm sure they have a lot of people wanting a lot of money from them, and even technical assistance, and I think that we may not be the top priority. I would hope that after we make a considered motion that we would. But I think just passing a motion without having the basis for why we were asking them and why we need this assistance, I'm not so sure it will get the attention it deserves. I think we need to do a formal motion, and I think that we have to have something on the table. I think that we need to do something like Commissioner Lohr did, and having a motion that is going to be reviewed for tonight. I just didn't think about writing something out for this meeting.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Clerk, can you restate the motion so we can vote on it, please?
The motion is to not send any powers to work groups, but to consider a motion at the next regular meeting in August to request technical assistance from ALIFA so that the commission can better understand how to set priorities under the powers section of its ordinance and other mandates to get effective advice in conducting its work.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Lohr.
No, but let the record state this does not preclude considering such a motion to approach ALIFA.
Commissioner Shanfield.
Yeah, it seems like we're voting on two things. Not
There's one
send work
motion.
to work
There's
group.
one motion. One
Yeah,
motion.
okay, so no.
Commissioner Olson.
No.
Commissioner Newman.
No.
Commissioner Clement.
No.
Commissioner Guri and Sherman.
Yes.
Commissioner Sturm.
No.
Commissioner Williams-Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
No.
Vice Chair Reeves?
No.
There are 2 ayes and 8 nays.
Thank you. That motion fails. So we will ask that 6, 7, 8, and 9 on the agenda be referred to the work groups as stated, 6 and 7 to the community engagement and the policy review work group jointly, number 8 to the policy review, and number 9 to the governance work group.
Excuse me,
Excuse me?
is that a motion? Because I don't think we can just send them without having a motion.
We can have a motion. I'll entertain a motion to send those to the work groups, as stated. 6, 7. Thank you. Any discussion? No further discussion?
Yes, let's try again. I like your idea, Commissioner Gray and Chairman, about technical assistance. Can we find out tonight what's possible with NACO? What technical assistance they could provide us immediately?
Tonight? I don't think so.
Madam Chair, I don't think that's possible for staff to do tonight at 7:12 in the evening. However, I do think that's something that the staff, working with the work groups, bringing back in the next meeting, proposal on what that would cover, what the costs would be, what the time and date. That's why I had suggested, it feels like a lot of this is workshopping items to bring back a formal motion to consider. So that, I mean, I think ideally on all of those things, formal recommendations or proposals or draft motions would be brought forward in the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Commissioner Olson?
Yes, I appreciate that these ideas will be considered by work groups. I don't think this implies any particular timeline, that these are things the work groups can work on. I think that work groups can also review the other enumerated powers and make suggestions and ask for referrals of that. I think the work groups can do the kind of work that they have time for and that they feel are priorities and come back to the commission in their monthly reports. And I think I appreciate that this will help move some of the discussions along.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion?
Could we just review which work group, are you including in your motion that particular items would go to particular work groups? Can we repeat those?
I can repeat them, yes. 6 and 7 to the community engagement and the PRR jointly. And then number 8 to the policy review work group, and number 9 to the governance work group.
Thank you.
Yep. Any further discussion? All right. Mr. Clerk, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Lohr?
Yes.
Commissioner Shanfield?
Yes.
Commissioner Olson?
Yes.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Commissioner Clement?
Yes.
Commissioner Gurry and Sherman?
No.
Commissioner Stern?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams-Johnson?
Yeah.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chair Reeves?
Yes.
There are 9 ayes and 1 nay.
All right, thank you. Those will be referred to the work groups. The next order of business is reports, and we'll begin with the report from the Office of Police Conduct Review. We have the June and July reports to receive, and those will be given by our interim director, Ms. Amini. I'm going to allocate a total of 40 minutes for those 2 reports. Welcome, Mrs. Amini. Get my timer out.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Carolina Amini, the Interim Director for OPCR. On the screen is the presentation from our office. So I will first like to start with the staffing updates. As you see on the screen, we are in the process of doing hiring for case investigators. It would be for 5 postings. On the screen, we'll have the URL for the open position. That position actually closes July 14th, so if there's anybody that might be interested or aware of anyone, please extend that link or that image for them to apply. In terms of the other posting positions, which is the case manager and the admin analyst 2, in the last few meetings I had brought them up in terms of the hiring process. The interviews have been completed. Formal requests for both positions have been sent to applicants. The case manager position has accepted the offer, and they will start July 29th. It is an internal applicant from the city, so I am hopeful that the onboarding will be quick, and the background check is already completed from the previous position. So my hope is that they will be able to start working at full capacity as soon as possible. The admin analyst 2, they are finalizing that offer, and that is also an internal position within OPCR. And again, with the anticipation that they would be able to start that position rather quickly. So this is an updated org chart within OPCR. As you can see that there is a legal analyst, business data analyst position there under data and research. There is a JAQ outs, which is a job assessment questionnaire. That title is actually going to change to a police analyst. Same position, same levels of responsibility, just kind of tweaking what they are supposed to, how they are supposed to respond within OPCR. That position is currently being detailed for one of our current case investigators, and that individual will be there in place for Chris Ben when he comes back from his leave. The intake investigator positions, there are 2 total. 2 of those are vacant due to turnover. The project coordinator position, supervisory, which is that case manager role. HR calls it project coordinator, OPCR calls it case manager. So if I were to use those terms interchangeably, I'm speaking on the same position. And then of those case investigators under the project coordinator position, 3 of those are vacant. And we also have 2 case investigators within that intake investigations section that are vacant as well. So that's where those 5 positions are coming from. 3 will be case investigations, which will be admins and preliminary investigations, and then the remaining 2 will be intake under the OPCR director. So for cases for intake, this is as of last Monday. We have 169 cases that are in our Axon standards, which is the newest records management system we have. In terms of legacy cases, we have 12, which is a total of 181. So the 181 cases include incoming complaints along with a backlog. So of those 12 that are in those legacy systems, which what we call practice manager, all of them have been scheduled for intake this month, so they will be heard by me by the end of July. And they have been assigned the case investigators. So in terms of our project plan for the backlog, we have developed a 3-tiered system. So it is priority 1, 2, and 3. And on this slide, we have priority 1 cases. So priority 1s are anything that is considered a serious misconduct case. And serious misconduct for us in terms of definition is, is anything that is considered a level D or an E violation within the discipline matrix. So any cases that involve impairment or intoxication of any officer on duty, any pursuits that involve injury, for example, improper handling of a call in a way that endangers the public, any allegations of excessive force, false arrest, insubordination, sexual misconduct, criminal misconduct, false statements, will be considered as a priority 1. And the other options are any potential administrative cases that could be referred to the external firm. As we were reviewing all of the backlog cases, we were doing a high-level overview of what did the complaint say, what may or may not have been stated in a police report or through a very quick review of body-worn camera. If there was anything that may have fallen under that category, we put it as that priority 1. And on top of that, any previously assigned cases that were pending supervisor approval. So any remaining cases that were through intake, that a 3401 was signed, or excuse me, that 3401 was drafted and just needed a review and signature, I put that as a priority 1. So for resource allocation, we have assigned 4 case investigators assigned to the P1 cases with our timeline of completion of August 30th, 2024. So I want to also state that that is all of our case investigators currently. Due to the turnover, we were unable to then further allocate that to a P2 and a P3 status. So I had told all of them to focus on the P1s with the mindset that a lot of these may become administrative cases given the severity of the allegations. And then to prioritize that to then focus on the next wave, which is that administrative backlog that we will obviously inherit once we are done with this backlog, with the intake backlog. The priority 2 are considered other misconduct cases, potential coaching cases, anything that was received before December 31st, 2023, and then any administrative cases that don't fall under the P1 status, so those more severe allegations. Any case previously assigned to current intake staff, which was around 36 cases, that was then sent to a priority 2. And then as a definition for other misconduct cases or anything regarding discourtesy, missed court dates, neglect of duty, failure to complete a police report, using profanity or indecent language, improper handling of evidence, for example, failing or excessive force that is not likely to cause bodily injury, or anything like a loss or damage of equipment, not including firearms and radios, of course, but anything that was considered a lower priority that we had found at phase when we did that review. And I thought I saw a hand. Yes.
Just a quick question. I see the term administrative case a lot, and I'm not clear on what that entails. Does that entail employment decisions, or what does that mean?
Sure. So there's an administrative and then a preliminary investigation. The difference between the two is that a prelim doesn't have officer interviews. So it's everything up until that point. So if we are unsure of whether or not something can have a different case disposition or full admin, we route it as a preliminary investigation. So our investigators can contact the complainant, any witnesses that aren't focus officers, and kind of get as much information as possible before we do those officer interviews. If we find that we need to find, and it needs to go through that disciplinary process, we then upgrade it to an administrative review. Yeah, absolutely. So for allocation, like I had mentioned before, all 4 of our case investigators that are currently in OPCR working on P1 cases, once they are done with our anticipation of it being in August, that they will then move to the priority 2 cases, and we anticipate that being done by October 30th. And the last phase, which is that priority 3, are what we are going to call service complaint cases, and anything that we received after January 1st that doesn't fall into P1 and P2. So a service complaint is anything that has that they don't necessarily contain any allegations of misconduct or may arise from other misunderstanding of how a specific police service is offered, or for dissatisfaction with constraints, policies, delayed police response time, or any delayed and call for service. Those are things that we see at face value that could have been a priority 3, and we are going to have that allocated to all the new case investigators once they are hired, and the case manager once he is onboarded, in between his other responsibilities along with myself. So these are the cases that are in P1, 2, and 3. We have a total of 110 identified as priority 1. We have processed 57 of them, with the remaining 53. So as of last Friday, I had assigned all the remaining 53 cases to the 4 case investigators for them to review, present to myself by the end of July. And then I have given myself up until July 30th to then sign, approve, and update our records management system accordingly. After that, the priority 2, we have identified 65 of them. We have processed 10 already with the remaining 55. That number I was hoping to be lower, but because of the turnover, we had to pause the priority 2 and redirect our attention to priority 1. Priority 3, we have 59. We have process 20 with a remaining of 39. And like I had mentioned, once those new hires begin, I will do the priority 3 with them, and we will use those as training. So cases and investigations. We separated these due to the records management system. So I can start from the bottom. The practice manager is the legacy one. So anything before February 21st, 2023 are in practice manager. We currently have 19 assigned to our internal investigators and 10 are assigned to external investigations. 5 are pending assignment with a total of 34. And then Axon, as you can see here, we have 12 assigned to internal, 9 to external, 18 pending assignment with a total of 39. And I anticipate that once we go through the P1 cases, those numbers will increase. So for the investigative cases and supervisor review, this is updated. I was able to review 2 more last Friday, so there are 10 cases pending my review, and 6 are awaiting final edits. Those final edits mean that I had reviewed them, sent them back to the case investigators, and asked them to update their reports. Some of them include finalizing some interviews, refining some allegations, and then normal, editing of a report. So we are waiting for those 6 to come back. And of course, that will be delayed because I had reassigned them to do intake. So as part of the administrative project plan, to which I will rely heavily on this case manager, we will have that in terms of timelines and what we would anticipate and expect for them to complete those additional assignments. So for the review panels, we had 18 total. 12 that had found merit, 4 came from OPCR, and 8 came from internal affairs. No merit were a total of 6, 1 from OPCR, 5 from internal affairs. You'll see here from the chief's decisions, these are included from the public website from MPD. And then the upcoming review panels, there were 9 total cases pending panel review as of last week, 6 from IA and 3 from OPCR. 6 cases were scheduled for panel review for the month of July, which is July 9th, which is tomorrow, just to remind everybody who's on the panel tomorrow that we have a panel tomorrow, July 23rd and July 26th. 3 panels were canceled in June and July due to the issues with sworn and civilian panelists availability, which left that 3 cases needed to be rescheduled for panel review. Those were pushed to the tail end of July, and the remaining will be pushed to August. The invitations for August panel scheduling will be sent. That was actually sent this last Friday. Zabia and I sent out those Outlook polls and calendars, so please be on the lookout for August scheduling dates. The data and research. We have OPCR has 1 full-time staff member whose primary focus is data and research, and that is that individual who is detailed into Chris Band's legal analyst position while he is out on leave. And then when possible, this individual assisted by another full-time staff member whose primary duty was to review BWC, was also assisting on that. And that team has spent 77 hours responding to 43 data requests in May of 2024 and 58 hours responding to 39 in June of 2024. So as you can imagine, on top of their normal workload, they are being asked to also produce an overwhelming amount of data requests that are coming in through the city. For website and reporting dashboards, in May and June, there were minor technical changes that were made to the OPCR related web pages, and that new focus is on the Police Conduct Review Panel web page. And then staff are meeting with IT's web team regarding the inquiries made by CCPO and how to improve the website. So everything that we had discussed in NACOL about moving the complement and officer to the same page as having our forms to submit a complaint, rewriting some of our web pages so the flow is easier, the visualizations. I remember about having something that is like a one-stop shop, something that is like a smart visualization to include. I did report that back to our OPCR staff, and they're going to speak with IT about what we can do. A new dashboard called Initial Routing of Complaints Made Against Minneapolis Police Department Officers is live. And that dashboard shows case routing decisions by IA and OPCR in aggregate. And that web page will continue to have updates and in development. As I've been told by IT, it's a work in progress, but it is live. So in response to that feedback, we are currently making improvements to the officer complaint history dashboard and to make a search feature that is more user-friendly. So the feedback that we had received that it doesn't work if you put the officer's full name, but instead of the last name, there was something that we could easily modify within the back end of that Tableau site. And as I have been told, that it works now, that you can put the officer's full name or partial name and it should come up. And then just a recap on the NACOL training. It was held June 22nd, 2024 at PSB. The CCPO brought forth multiple topics for discussion, and of course this is not an extensive list, but the website updates that I had talked about earlier, the review panel document, the collaborative editing. We had reformatted all of July's panels to make sure that is in a collaborative way. So now when you go into a review panel, you would be able to access one document and everyone would be able to work in it in real time. So you no longer have to wait for someone or send someone your comments or what you wanted to include and then wait for them to respond. It is now everybody's responsibility while you're having active discussions to put in your comments. And then the effective case review as well. That is something that we were going to bring up to have a more formalized training for next month, to kind of talk about where we are with the review panels, the new templates, any questions that you may have, maybe screenshots of the SharePoint site and how best to review something when we are sending out, and any feedback that you all would provide OPCR in terms of the Microsoft Outlook polls. Is it working? Is it not? Are you getting too many emails? Too few emails? That's kind of what I was hoping for August. And then lastly, the other thing that was brought up in the NACOL meeting was the CCPO budget. So I had reached out to finance to see exactly what that budget was. Per year is $20,000. But that budgetary control is held within the department head and not with CCPO. So it is with civil rights. It is part of our budget. So per the resolution, CCPO members receive that $50 stipend for meetings, mandatory trainings, the review panels, and then within that $20K budget is meant to support the 4 meetings per year for up to 8 special meetings in the first year, those 40 review panels, the annual training for 15 members, the patrol training, and the MPD in-service training, and also the NACOL membership conference and attendance. And then, of course, the miscellaneous expenses, parking, transportation, materials, outreach, registration fees. That is all part of that $20,000. I do have to also get an update from city staff as to what our current and running budget is, and I can provide that update for you in the August meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Amini. Are there any questions for our interim director? Commissioner Smith?
Madam Chair, thank you. Director Amini, I think every meeting, ask for more information about not only the backlog and where we are in the various stages of intake and investigation and disciplinary panels, but also asking what is your work plan for attacking that backlog. And I just want to say as one person that I'm very impressed with your diligence in managing this caseload and all the information that you're presenting, with admittedly not all the resources that you need to have to do this job. So I want to thank you for that detailed information about how you're attacking with various priority levels. I might not agree with every single criteria for the priorities. What I would still invite is if there is some way that the commission could have a cumulative dashboard so that we would be able to go back to when you first started reporting to us in March about the state of the backlog, which I remember distinctly was in February, we were told there were 297 cases total in the backlog, which I understood at the time to mean that there were citizens, people in Minneapolis who had filed complaints about police misconduct, maybe several years old, that still had their cases pending. So I'm still curious, what about those cases? Where are we with the old cases and how many keep coming in? I think it's not as easy as I am asking to present such a dashboard, but if we could show progress from month to month, where new cases are coming in and how they're moving through the stages of the system, I think it would also be a way for us to be more aware of all of your work and also be aware of where there might be resource challenges or other process challenges for us to be aware of. So that's just one more invitation to you for yet more information.
Sure. There were 239 as of that meeting within the backlog. And what we defined the backlog was everything, I believe, was March 26th of 2024. Any complaint before that is backlog. So of that 239, we are about halfway done within that backlog. And I can see how, I don't know how to make those visualizations. I can definitely ask IT for assistance on how to do that. But yes, a visualization makes sense. But that's kind of what that's the definition for what I use. It was a date cutoff, everything from that date to the inception. So that yes, there are very old cases that then came up through a quality control report that were mislabeled. They were categorized incorrectly. So they in previous years, we didn't actually see them as open complaints, but in fact were held in a different status. Now that we have discovered those are included in that backlog. So we are addressing those. And those were those 12 that are remaining. So hopefully we will have those, more importantly, we have them identified. So we now have them in the project plan. But yes, I can follow up with IT. I don't want to say that I can have it by August. That is not within my own workload. I can definitely ask to see how quickly they can create something like that. But yes, to answer your question, that is part of that backlog, everything from inception to that date.
And Madam Chair, in summary, where you've made your way since you've taken over your duties, about halfway, you've cut the backlog by half?
About half, yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Green-Sherman?
Yes, I just, I want to thank you for, I see a marked difference between the June and the July OPCR Director Report. I prefer the July edition. I think the charts are very, very helpful. With that said, I do have a few questions. If you go back to staffing, which is the third slide. Yes. So I count that there are 13 positions, including yourself, and according to this sheet, there are 7 vacancies, but you reported that this might be a little out of date.
Yeah.
So of those 7 vacancies, I believe you said 2 have been filled, and 1 is going to start July 29th, the case manager, and then there might be some other people. So of the 7 that were reported here, how many have been hired and will be starting by the time we meet in August?
So of the 7, 1 of them is that project coordinator, supervisory, case manager. That individual will start at the end of July. The administrative analyst 2 has also been offered a position that is currently, it hasn't been finalized yet. It is within negotiations. I hope to have that finalized by the end of this week, if not early next week. Those 2 positions by August will be filled, with the remaining 5 case investigator positions, 2 which are in intake, and the remaining 3 are case investigators, so admins and prelims. We are in the interview process of those, and those external applications will close the 14th, 19th, excuse me, I'm sorry. It will be next week, July 14th.
Okay, so there'll be 5 vacancies then that
That's
you
right.
still have to handle. My sympathies. I don't envy you, I know. And if I'm right, when I read the June report, we did have 2 intake investigators, and they both left?
Yes.
Okay.
We
so-
had 1 intake investigator leave and 1 case investigator leave.
Okay, so it says here, intake investigator, 2 total, 2 vacant. How do you handle intake without having intake investigators?
The case investigators are handling intake currently.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if you move to the next slide, which is case intake, cases in intake, I'm not as familiar in any way with this stuff. I'm sure you dream about this stuff at night. I feel sometimes like the grandfather in the movie where with Cher, where he's so confused about who's marrying who and what, and he just says, "I'm so confused." So with that in mind, I don't mean to be picky, but I just want to understand. When you have these cases in intake, 169, how does this compare to these 3 columns to June, to May, to April? I mean, I want to go with what Commissioner Smith said. I would like to see, not just in the dashboard, but in our reports, how we're making progress. It's very cumbersome for me, and I don't expect your staff to take care of me, but I think the public, too, wants to know how we are making progress. So of these 169, I would want to know, I'm not asking you to give me the answers, but next time you report out, I would like to know how the total of 181 compares to July, June, maybe 3 months, so we can see a trend. The other thing I would want to know is how old are these 181 cases? How many are less than 6 months? Or how many are brand new? How many are less than 6 months? How many are 6 months to 12 months? How many are over a year, and how many are over 2 years? And again, it would be good to know how we're making progress on that. At some point, if we are prioritizing the oldest cases, and I know you've said that, we should get to a point where there are no cases over 2 years. Hopefully then we get to a point where there are no cases over 18 months, et cetera, and we get to a point where all of the cases are new or within like 6 months. I think that's the goal. Would that be reasonable to say?
Right, and for the agreement, intake should only be at maximum 30 days old.
Okay, great, perfect. So if you skip to a few slides ahead, the chart that talks about intake prioritization data, and that's it, thank you. So I went back and looked at the June report, and I may be mixing apples and oranges, so stop me if I am. But in the June report, there were 4 levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. Now there are 3 priorities, 1, 2, and 3. I don't understand what levels went into priority 1, what levels went into priority 2, and priority 3. I don't want to take up all the time, but if you could answer that for the next meeting, that would be very helpful.
I can answer that now. I can be very brief. Priority 4 were any remaining cases that we haven't done that high-level review. So when I created that PowerPoint for June, we weren't done trying to classify the remaining cases. As we finish that classification, priority 4 then was no longer needed because we had classified them. So then I had pushed them all, those remaining priority 4s, into 1, 2, and 3. The other difference between the June and July is that we had refined what is priority 1, what is priority 2, what is priority 3. And to go back to Commissioner Smith, and in your statement that you might not necessarily agree what is falling within P1, 2, and 3, those classifications are being pulled from our standard operating procedure draft that IA and OPCR are working on. So any future cases will have those same types of criteria and classifications. So instead of creating something myself just for these backlogs, I then revamped it, took what we had already agreed upon within the enterprise, and just forecasted that along with our backlog.
So the next question, I appreciate that. The next question I want to ask is, in June, when you total all 4 levels, there were 170 total cases. But for July, it jumped up to 234. Why?
I had made a mistake in that June. So what I had did is that I excluded everything that we had already processed before June, instead of saying the global amount of inception to March 26. So I realized that error and then added those cases that we had already processed. So this is the true number of what is considered in our backlog versus cases that we just haven't processed yet in our backlog. That's the difference between the June and July numbers.
So the July numbers of 234 are what still are in the intake prioritization?
Right. That is the entire backlog of how we define backlog.
And then, Commissioner
Gershon, hold on just one moment. So we have 6 minutes left, and I want to get down to see if anyone else have any questions, because you've been on for about 10 minutes now. So I just want to make sure, is there anyone else, because we have 6 minutes left on this agenda item, that has any questions for Director Amini? Commissioner Shanfield.
I do have one quick question about the budget. You said it's $20,000. Thank you so much. That was a direct follow-up from the conversation we had just a couple weeks ago. Quick question is, does that $20,000 include the support of the city staff, such as yourself, all the folks up here? Okay. It doesn't include in personnel costs?
I guess not. I'm glad that you answered that, City Clerk. I was not aware of that.
I can speak to this very briefly. When we created the CCPO, Andrew Hawkins, who at that time was the principal staff person in civil rights, and I suggested that at least $20,000 should be set aside for the first year of operation. It's something this body should seriously consider in terms of making a recommendation to the elected officials going forward. $20,000 was a best guess that we put together based on what we knew would be involved in getting training from NACL, travel, and memberships. I will also point out this is one of the only boards and commissions with a dedicated budget like that. So it is rare, but it's important for the work of this group.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have 3 quick questions.
We have 4 minutes and 12 seconds.
Okay. Commissioner Smith, you said that you recalled the number of intake was 239. Was that right when you said that before?
What I recalled was 297 that Director Anderson Kelleher reported in February, but that's just my memory.
So then we've gone from 297 to 234 for the intake prioritization?
Yeah, I don't have that number in front of me. I can definitely report back on what that full backlog number is, but it is, I remember it's something close to 230. I've been doing numbers all day. I very well could be wrong, but I can definitely give you that full number for August.
Great. And if you could go to the review panels completed in the last year, I noticed that that there were 12 that had merit, but when you look underneath where it says chief's decision, if you add those numbers up, 1, 3, 4, 4, and 5, it's 17. Are some of the cases in multiple processes? So for instance, 3 are in the grievance period, but they might also be included in remanded for further investigation?
No, but there could be a case that has multiple allegations.
Right. So, but when it says 12 have merit, and then underneath the chief's decision, it's 17. So you're saying that some of these are because the officers have multiple allegations, or the panels did? I just don't know what the discrepancy is between 17 and 12.
Yeah, let me follow up with the staff member that pulled these numbers for me, and I can clarify that in an email. That is
Okay.
a good point.
And then just for the next report, if you go to websites and reporting dashboards, could you tell us at the next time, when you say that it had, that there were inquiries made by the CCPO, could you list what those inquiries were? I don't recall all of them. Could that be something that could be in the August report?
Yeah, and those are some of those things that I had mentioned from NACOL with the visualizations and moving some things around for an easier flow of the website. But yes, I can do that.
Okay, that'd be great. And then last thing is the NACOL training. I know you took diligent notes and you were doing it for all day. I think I want to acknowledge that. It's a long training and you did a great job with that. I thought we were going to get full notes of what came out. I know this includes it. I might have missed it, and I'm sorry if I did. So did a full list of all the things that we had talked about following up on get sent to us?
No, nothing came from OPCR, no, but I can definitely send that out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. With 1 minute and 11 seconds to spare. Thank you, Director Meany.
Thank you.
The clerk will ask to receive and file that report. Next, we have our work group reports as listed on the agenda. I'll allocate 10 minutes for each report. And the first work group is the Police Policy and Recommendations Work Group. Commissioner Shanfield.
Thank you. How do I address you? Interim Chair Reeves, would you hit me after 5 and just let me know? Great, thanks. The reason for that is our work group did not meet in June. We weren't able to do that. We did meet in May. And in the interim, we are participating in things such as panels. Many of us have served on panels in the last month, last 6 weeks, and the NACOL training, which we've discussed a lot tonight. I've also invited the work group to educate ourselves about coaching. That's been in the news, and so it's a discussion we'd like to take on in the near future. In the work group report, included some takeaways from the NACOL training as well. I won't read those to you now in the interest of time. But just to note that as a result of the training, there were several action items for our work group as well. Things to look into, things from Seattle, things from Atlanta, things that we want to learn more about. So we'll follow up with that in our next meeting in July. And then in terms of next steps here, Director Meany, we look forward to receiving the checklist that was mentioned during the NACOL training. We didn't get a copy of it then, and she walked us through it, but we didn't, she said she would follow up with an email, and that would be really helpful to know what is all on the checklist around effective panel review. That would be great if we could get that. And then also to find out how we can take her up on the technical assistance. If there's anything I can do for that, I would be happy to help. And then one other quick follow-up item, as Commissioner Sturm mentioned, we were talking about the special orders and the folder in our SharePoint, and just ensuring that that's been updated by the city to have the most recent special orders in there. It looked like it hadn't been updated for a while. So we would welcome that support as well. And I want to give us all a shout out because we've done a lot more agreeing here today than we have done, I think, ever. So good job, us.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on that report?
I did forget one thing, which was based on the agenda from tonight, we will look at 6, 7, and 8 in our next work group meeting as well.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions. I'll ask the clerk to receive and file that report. The next work group is community engagement. Commissioner Smith.
Madam Chair, our work group had a meeting on June 28th. I thought I submitted a work group report. I don't see it in the packet, but it was a brief report to say that we reviewed the May 21st public hearing and the summary of comments prepared by the city clerk. And then we had some discussion about a resolution to acknowledge those comments. And so that was the main heart of our discussion. You do have in your packet a draft of a resolution with findings and recommendations from the May 21st public hearing. What this resolution does is, and I'm trying to recall if that's a separate agenda item on our meeting report, so maybe I shouldn't go there yet. All right, I'll stop.
All right, thank you. Are any comments or questions Commissioner Commissioner Green-Sherman.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I got a little confused with the policy, Police Policy Review and Recommendation Group. When Commissioner Scheinfeld, you said that per tonight's motion, you're going to tackle 6, 7, and 8. I thought number 7 was going to community engagement.
Oh, I said we work group, and we are doing that jointly. 6 and
7.
6 and 7 both go to both community engagement and PPRR.
Thank you. I didn't hear that correctly. I appreciate you confirming that for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? All right.
I think we should take up the resolution that Commissioner Smith alluded to.
Okay. Let's do it. Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
Okay, Madam Chair, then in your packet is a resolution that notes in the recitals that we held our duly noticed public hearing on May 21st, that 20 individuals appeared and offered comments and asked questions about our work and MPD policies and practices. We've worked with the city staff to gather answers to questions raised at the public hearing. I'm not clear if those have yet been posted on our commission website, but I believe they can be. And then as a work group and now as a commission, we've reviewed those comments and prepared a summary. In reviewing all of the comments made by all of the persons that came to our May 21st hearing or submitted written comments, it seemed that they fell into 3 main categories. The first was about the commission and community engagement. For example, urging more accessibility for public comments, improved commission communications out to the public using social media, engaging more effectively with those who experienced loss due to police misconduct, recognizing that we're still healing from years of trauma, and the suggestion that houses of worship could provide a space for police officers and community to gather. The second category of comments really went, I thought, or it seemed to me, to the commission's effectiveness. Questions about whether we had adequate authority, whether we were using the authority we were given, whether we had effectively, as of May, engaged in meaningful policy review. The suggestion that there were many applications to the commission back in 2023, and those applications would be a source of policy, untapped source of ideas for policy. The suggestion that there were 40 case summaries that haven't been presented to us for or evaluated. A notion that we are still developing our bylaws. The idea there should be more community access to MPD policies for review and engagement, more transparency, and in general, an urge to us to be more effective in doing our work. The final category of comments to me involved general comments about police conduct and law enforcement generally, and we heard diverse points of view about concerns with police misconduct and its impact in community, and the failure to really come to grips with the trauma, as well as pleas for recognition of changes in law enforcement and the notion that there are many good police officers dedicated to serving the city. So the next step of the resolution, after trying to capture all of those comments and categorize them or summarize them in those 3 categories, is to again express our gratitude and request that the answers to the questions be posted on our commission website if they haven't already. And then 4 action steps. It seemed to me in our discussions that as a work group that if we've heard these comments, it would be important for us to take some actions in response. So the first action is beginning with the August meeting, and in fact it turned out to be the July meeting, the time for public comments be placed early in the agenda and on or before the end of the year. We will evaluate the effectiveness of our meetings and order of business, and always retaining the discretion to adjust the order of business at our meetings to promote public accessibility and the productivity and effectiveness of the commission. Number 2, that we will pursue as a commission an aligned process for review of MPD policies in communication with the MPD Implementation Unit, the Office of Police Conduct Review, and the Independent Evaluator, Effective Law Enforcement for All, as appropriate, and that the commission include consideration of MPD policy review as a regular agenda item of our regular meetings. Third, that the commission will pursue increased budgetary resources in the 2025 city budget to increase the level of direct staff support for the commission in order to facilitate greater capacity for policy review and community engagement and communications with the public. And fourth, the commission explore the feasibility and value of including commendations of meritorious police officer conduct in public reporting and data analysis in addition to complaints. So we heard a lot from the public with many different points of view. This is an effort to summarize it for the record and then to offer 4 action steps for us to take as a commission in response to those comments. I'm sure it can be improved and welcome all of your improvements.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions on the resolution? Commissioner Green Sherman.
Yes, I appreciate the work that was done. It's a lot to read through. I did review all of the public comment. I think that there was some comments made, unless I'm confusing meetings that I've reviewed, so I apologize. I thought that there was some need for public technical assistance, that people talked about some frustration in knowing how to navigate the dashboard, and there were some other technical things. So I would want to propose a 5th step that would be having community meetings that would provide the public technical assistance and training on how to use the dashboard, what it's meant for, how to use LIMS, like we're going to get. I think that there was some expression made that people don't know how to get information or were frustrated about exactly how to get it. And we had in a public comment tonight that somebody looked for on the marked agenda the written comments that they made, but they couldn't find them. So again, I think that's a LIMS training, but I think we need other training, including and especially the dashboard for the public.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, if I'm assuming Commissioner Smith that's agreeable to add that in some capacity to the resolution. Mr. Clerk, how will we go about doing that, and for purposes since it's not necessarily done, the resolution's been included in the packet?
Assuming there's no objection, Madam Chair, I would assume, correct me if I captured this incorrectly, that we could add a 5th finding under the resolved clauses that says to provide public training on the use of resources and technical systems related to the work of the CCPO, including but not limited to the dashboard.
All right, thank you very much.
Could we add to that, including but not limited to the dashboard and LIMS? I think that is a really great training to have as well. Thank you, and that would capture what I'm getting at. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if you want to make a motion, Commissioner Smith, to bring this forward.
Madam Chair, I move adoption of the resolution with the 5th item added as Commissioner Green Sherman and the city clerk described.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Clerk, can you take the roll on the adoption of the resolution?
Commissioner Lohr?
Yes.
Commissioner Shanfield?
Yes.
Commissioner Olson?
Yes.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Commissioner Clement?
Yes.
Commissioner Gurian Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Sturm?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams-Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chair Reeves?
Yes.
There are 10 ayes.
Thank you. And 1 second over. Good job, everyone. All right. Ask that you receive and file that report. Next, work group report from governance.
So we don't have
Commissioner Olson.
we don't have a written report to submit, but I would like to do 2 things. First, review the process that the governance group used to create the bylaws. The city clerk will be leading our discussion regarding the adoption of the bylaws and the substance of it, but I will just like to let everybody know how we got to this point. And it started with a draft of the bylaws from the city clerk's office as part of an citywide effort to standardize bylaws for commissions and boards. And the first draft we got contained a number of comments from our city partners, the city attorney's office, civil rights director, and the city clerk. And we, as a governance work group, created a shared document and started adding our own comments, questions, suggestions. Some of the debates were over word choices. Some were suggesting additional provisions. But we did that process for a few weeks, and once the work group had a version of the shared document that we agreed on, we sent that version back to our city partners for more input from the city attorney, the city clerk, and civil rights. And then we met virtually and had a vigorous discussion on all the topics, and finally reached an agreement on what the bylaws should look like. And that the end product then is what the city clerk will present tonight. We have also received some comments from the public that were all very thoughtful and impressive in the eye for detail, and those will be addressed to the extent necessary by the city clerk.
Okay.
The second thing I need to talk about is that with the resignation of Chair Dido Swinton, who provided a ton of useful work on this document, and I want to express appreciation, even though she's not here, also appreciation for all the work she did in the past year. But we're down to two members of our work group, that myself and Commissioner Clement, and we do need more. So if anybody is looking for a work group to join or wants to be recruited away from the one you're in, please let either of us know. We would like to get additional members, and I anticipate we'd use a similar kind of process, reviewing shared documents and talking things over virtually rather than a lot of meetings.
Thank you, and hopefully the new commissioners may want to join the governance work group. Are there any questions or comments on that report? Okay, thank you. I'll have the clerk receive and file the report. Next item up is unfinished business. We have the order and the consideration of draft bylaws. Before I recognize the city clerk for a staff presentation, I want to see if Commissioner Olson or other members of the governance work group had any comments to make.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And now we'll have a presentation by the city clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank Commissioner Olson and the members of the governance work group for all of their work to bring these bylaws forward. I'd mentioned earlier in the meeting that the city has partnered with this body, given its prominence and its newest formation, to really bring forward some standard bylaws and rules that could be applied to all of the city's boards and commissions as part of enterprise-wide reforms for city boards and commissions. And so appreciate your patience with us as we've worked with the work group to bring that forward. As you know, the first draft of these bylaws were introduced at the April 15th meeting. They were postponed to the May 13th meeting, subsequently circulated to all commissioners in final form on May 27th. Were supposed to be considered at June with no quorum. They were postponed till tonight. So the good news is we've had ample opportunity to review them. And as a result of that, as the commissioner indicated, we've had an opportunity to address some initial feedback and concerns. I'm going to go through a series of slides that summarize the bylaws. I'll note you should have copies in your agenda packets at the desks of both the bylaws and my PowerPoint presentation. So with that, I'll move right into the first piece. As you know, the commission was created by the mayor and council under the auspices of the ordinance number 2022-058 that was enacted in December of 2022. That ordinance was essentially a complete revision of the existing chapter on police conduct oversight, which is codified as Chapter 172 in the city's Code of Ordinances. And under Section 172.60H2, this commission then has the authority to adopt bylaws and rules, also subject to approval by the city council, to govern its operation. To achieve that goal, this body's governance work group, led by Commissioner Olson, has worked over the past many months to complete these draft bylaws. This body, just like City Council, exists within a legal framework that's dictated by various authorities shown on this slide. These legal authorities determine what power this commission has and how that power is exercised. And as you can see, the state constitution and statutes, as well as judicial decisions about statutes, form the highest ranking level of legal authority under which this body exists and operates. Subordinate to state authority is the city's home rule charter, which functions like the city's local constitution. It is the primary legal authority under which the city, as a municipal corporation, exists and operates. Legally, the city charter is a delegation of a portion of the state's sovereign authority to be exercised at the local level. The city charter empowers the council to establish and delegate functions to bodies created by it, such as this commission. Next in the order of legal authority is the Municipal Code of Ordinances. If the city charter is like our Constitution, then the Code of Ordinances is our body of local laws, which are enacted in the form of ordinances. You might think of them as municipal statutes. This commission was created itself by ordinance, which is its enabling legislation. That ordinance creates this body, delegates to it certain powers and functions, and provides for its general operation. That ordinance is subject to the control of the mayor and council. Beneath the level of that enabling ordinance, you'll find that the next highest ranking authority is this body's own bylaws. Subject to the enabling ordinance, the bylaws give greater detail and dimension to the internal structure and operation of this body. The bylaws are intended to provide an operating framework that is known, predictable, and stable. Because they interpret and apply the provisions of the enabling legislation, bylaws need to be adopted both by this body and then also confirmed with the approval of the mayor and council. As I noted, this is provided in section 172.60H2 of the enabling legislation itself. In a very simplistic model, then, you could think of the enabling ordinance and these bylaws as your constitution. On the next two slides, I'm going to cover some governance fundamentals. First, as I indicated, the City of Minneapolis is a municipal corporation that's created under the provisions of a home rule charter. Under the city charter, the city council has authority to create subordinate bodies to perform certain delegated functions. These bodies that are created by the city council are subject to its authority and its oversight. They have only those powers, duties, or functions prescribed for them and have no inherent municipal powers or authority of any kind. As the city council creates them, the council may alter, adjust, or even abolish them. This commission is an example of that kind of subordinate body. It was created under the city's home rule authority by the mayor and council, and it's subject to their authority and oversight. Secondly, this commission's authority is vested in the body and is exercised by the body. It is not vested in and may not be exercised by individual members. Much like the city council itself, this commission is a corporate body. That means its authority is shared by the members acting collectively. The body exists and conducts its business within the confines of a duly convened meeting of members. Outside the structure of a legal meeting, the commission technically does not exist. And that's the same thing is true of the city council. As already noted, the commission's powers are restricted to those delegated in its enabling legislation. The basic legal premise is that power must be given. It can't be assumed. That's the foundational doctrine of municipal law in the United States, which was codified by the United States Supreme Court in two cases that it considered, first in 1891 and then in 1907. That doctrine is often called Dillon's Rule. You may have heard of that. In short, it means that municipal governments have only those powers expressly delegated to them and no more. So again, the important point here is that authority must be given. It can't be assumed. Questions about the body's authority should always be referred to the city attorney. Finally, I'll note that this slide indicates the commission acts in two primary capacities. First, as a public forum to provide for meaningful community engagement in police oversight. Second, as part of the city's review process for allegations of police misconduct. Those capacities are tied very broadly to the three principal functions of this body. And for the record, I'll state that those three primary functions are: 1, to provide a public forum to engage the community in police oversight through an appointed civilian body. 2, to provide civilian participation by commissioners in the deliberative work of the review panels in processing allegations of police misconduct. And 3, to give recommendations to the mayor, city council, and police chief within the body's defined jurisdiction. This slide highlights the 10 articles that have been incorporated into the draft bylaws before you. As I mentioned, I'm going to go over each of those articles at a high level. Article 1 restates the core purpose and delegated duties of this commission as provided in its own enabling legislation. I already talked about the 3 primary functions, which are also highlighted in this article, and I've covered those. Article 1 restates that the commission has no independent authority beyond what is expressly granted by applicable law, city charter, ordinance, or another lawful action. I'm happy to respond to questions about this first draft article, or else I'll proceed in the interest of time to Article 2 and 3.
Please proceed.
So this next slide covers Articles 2 and 3. This addresses membership and terms. As you can see, Article 2 restates existing provisions about membership that are already contained in your enabling legislation, but it does add new provisions related to service expectations. These are captured in sections D through H and are shown on pages 2 and 3 of the draft before you. Importantly, these expectations of service are framed as a two-way commitment. First, expectations of this body and of the city in terms of its support for the body. And then secondly, expectations that the city, on behalf of its residents, have for the members of this body in terms of how commissioners will conduct the business of this body. And so to Commissioner Gurry and Sherman's point earlier in this meeting, I think that this provides a hook for more discussion. I mentioned that another reform driven for enterprise-wide reform with boards and commissions is a participant agreement, which is an individual commitment to the service expectations identified by the mayor and the council for service on any city board or commission, something to come, but this is a hook into that issue and would also be something that would be addressed in the body's rules, procedural rules. Article 3, covered here, provides for how appointments to the body are made, explains the terms of membership, attendance requirements, and procedures for resignations or removals, as well as defining the official membership roster, which is filed with the Office of City Clerk. Most of this is simply a recapitulation of what's in your enabling legislation, but put into the bylaws with a bit more detail on service expectations, as I already summarized. I'm happy to respond to points about these 2 articles or move forward to the next.
Please proceed.
So this next slide covers Articles 4 and 5. These pertain to the body's officers and its staff. In Article 4, you can see that the bylaws provide for a chair and a vice chair. These are the required officers under your enabling legislation. The chair and the vice chair must be members of the commission selected by the body to facilitate its work. And that last phrase, I think, is key, facilitate its work. Frequently, the question of officers raises questions and concerns amongst the body. So I'd like to address some core concepts that have been included in your draft bylaws. First, the basic concept that applies to officers is that they are responsible for helping the body to plan and conduct its work. Not to conduct the work of the body, to help the body plan and conduct its work. And so in that regard, they have the same rights and responsibilities as every other member of the body. Being an officer does not equate to extra power or authority. In fact, I would call it more responsibility, in that they bear the burden of facilitating the work of the body. We've reinforced this concept by stating in your bylaws that the chair is the, quote, first among a body of equals chosen by the members to facilitate the accomplishment of its objectives. The vice chair is next in line of succession and helps the chair in performing these additional leadership responsibilities. The chair and the vice chair are to be selected by the body at its organizational meeting and at its first regular meeting each year thereafter. And again, the chair and the vice chair have only those duties that are provided in the bylaws, focused on helping the commission, as a body, to plan, organize, and coordinate its work, and they have no other duties unless expressly provided in the bylaws or by a formal vote or action of this body. In Article 5, we've identified the key staff positions that are here to assist the body in conducting its work. These include the city clerk as the body's secretary, the city attorney as the body's attorney and its legal advisor, which is also established under City Charter, Section 7.2C, and of course the Civil Rights Department, specifically its Office of Police Conduct Review, as the unit within the city's administration responsible for providing professional, technical, and logistical support for the commission. I'm happy to respond to any questions about Articles 4 or 5, or we'll proceed to the next slide.
Please proceed.
This slide covers Article 6, which addresses meetings of the commission. It's found on pages 6, 7, and 8 in the draft bylaws in front of you. This covers a lot of territory. However, most of these details are pulled directly from relevant provisions of the Minnesota Open Meeting Law, which does apply to this body. This article defines the commission's quorum as being a majority of the total number of seats, regardless of vacancies. Thus, the enabling legislation provides a total of 15 seats, and a majority of that number of seats is 8, which is then this body's quorum for constituting an official meeting and taking action. As I said, this article borrows heavily from state law with respect to public meetings. It incorporates statutory definitions for the various types of meetings and the notices that are required based on the type of meeting. It restates the ordinance's provision that mandates at least one public hearing each year to give community an opportunity to provide input on police department policies, rules, practices, and special orders. The draft also provides space to identify the regular meeting place. Those are all very straightforward components included in the draft bylaws, which, as I said, align with state law and our own applicable policies. In terms of committees and work groups, I'll note that there is an entire article focused on these kinds of subordinate bodies, so I will hold comments about committees and work groups until I get to that, which is in proposed Article 8. So with that summary, I'm happy to respond to questions about Article 6 or proceed to the next slide.
Proceed, please.
The next slide addresses Article 7, which is about the body's core decision-making procedures. It encompasses a variety of issues, including the issuance of notices about commission meetings and commission decisions, the timing of agenda publication and accessibility, and how this body takes official action. And it's on this last point, which I think is the most important, that I'd like to reiterate. The commission takes official action only by a majority vote during a legal meeting on matters within its delegated authority. That statement has at least 3 important points, which I'll explain. First, all of the commission's authority is vested in this body, not in its individual members. Therefore, any official action must be made by the body, and as I said, the body technically only exists within the parameters of a legal meeting that has at least a quorum of members present and participating. Second, there must be a proposal before the body to decide, and that proposal must be within its delegated authority, which is determined by the enabling legislation. Action outside of that delegated authority is likely void. Third, the action or decision must be made by a majority vote of commissioners who are present and participating in the meeting, assuming that there is a quorum present. Section D of Article 7 provides that the commission shall abide by procedural rules approved by the City Council. These rules are to be in addition to bylaws, and they are being developed right now for presentation at a future meeting in the next few months. Those procedural rules, much like council's own rules, will prescribe how the meetings of this commission are to be organized and conducted. They are intended to be complementary to the bylaws, but to deal more specifically with the practical details of planning and conducting meetings of the CCPO. The rules would incorporate and supersede the agreed meeting norms, which have been read at the beginning of each of the meetings for several months now. Having adopted rules helps to provide additional stability and predictability for how meetings are conducted. And just like these bylaws, the enabling ordinance requires that the rules also be confirmed by the City Council. The rules would include provisions related to the order of business for regular meetings, the manner of conducting voting on proposals, and basic parliamentary matters. One of the issues that would be addressed in rules, which is responsive to criticism from the community, is the issue of public comments during the body's meetings. Under Article 6 of this, the part of the provision related to regular meetings, the draft bylaws do provide that regular meetings may include time devoted to the acceptance of public comments. This provides the hook in the bylaws that will then be expounded upon and addressed in greater details in the body's rules. For example, when and how comments are accepted, whether comments are limited to a general comment period or are also allowed on substantive proposals, the subject and duration of public comments, and similar matters. I will insert here that the City Council, as part of enterprise-wide reform for all city boards and commissions, is developing a standard set of both bylaws and rules, as I mentioned. And so we appreciate this body's willingness to work with us as the first out of the gate to have both the model bylaws and rules. Among the goals of these reforms across the city is that we hope these reforms tie our boards and commissions more closely to the City Council and create a more consistent meeting environment for all of these bodies and provide consistency and predictability in that meeting format for members of the community. Regardless of which meeting they come to, they should have a basic understanding of how public meetings are conducted by the city. So the goal here is to enable all of the city's boards and commissions to operate efficiently with the greatest flexibility possible while still having consistent access to formalized procedures when and where necessary. All of that is to say, the issue of public comments at meetings of the commission are not addressed in detail in the bylaws before you. But that does not mean that public comments aren't contemplated, that they won't be accepted, or that they are prevented from being taken by this body at any time. Indeed, as this body is aware, and as the community is abundantly aware, one of the primary, if not the number one reason for the commission to be created was to serve as a public forum so that there is a meaningful opportunity for community engagement and police oversight. I think I've said that 4 times now. And I want to recognize that Commissioner Gurian Sherman and I have had long conversations about that. It is the first objective, the first goal in the enabling legislation that creates this body. So the idea of public comments is essential to the work of this body. It is not addressed in depth in the bylaws, but will be provided in more substantial detail within the rules. This article also prohibits lobbying and political activity. The draft bylaws recognize the rights that individuals have to engage in political activity, but clearly state that the commissioners may not use their position as a member of this body to endorse, support, or oppose any candidate for public office or any ballot proposition submitted to voters. It also provides that the commission itself shall not take positions except that it may, by a formal action, submit its recommendations to the mayor and the city council, provided that the subject is within the commission's jurisdiction as defined under its enabling ordinance. Finally, this article provides the manner in which formal communications by this body may occur between it and the mayor and city council. Again, formal communications should be made in writing, and they should be submitted via the staff with a copy filed with the city clerk. Such communications should reflect the position of the body, which can only be taken by a majority vote or by unanimous consent in a legal meeting. I'm happy to respond to questions about Article 7 or proceed to the next slide.
All right, please proceed.
The last slide covers the final 3 articles, Articles 8, 9, and 10, which deal respectively with committees and work groups, annual reporting, and amendment to these bylaws. Article 8 provides that the commission may create standing or special committees with prior authorization by the city council. That is the key point I've made before. The council created this commission, and it has the authority to decide all manner of how this body is formed, what authority it has or doesn't have, and how it operates. That includes whether standing committees are allowed. In a very practical way, this is important because commissioners are paid for their attendance at meetings, and if standing committees are permitted, it would likely constitute a qualifying event for participants to receive a stipend. So there are practical implications to that decision. If authorized by the council, the bylaws should then be amended to reflect specific committees that may be necessary and include details about their formation, their functions, and other details. The bylaws provide that if authorized, committees may only be composed of commissioners in a number less than a quorum of the full body. That means that any committee established could only be composed of 7 or fewer commissioners, since a quorum of this body is 8, based on the total number of seats. Committee meetings would be subject to the requirements of the open meeting law, just like the meetings of this body. And, as with the commission itself, any actions by a committee are subject to a majority vote of the members of that committee, assuming the presence of a quorum during a meeting. The commission may also create work groups of its own members less than a quorum of the body. We have experience with that. Work groups tend to be temporary in nature. They're intended to give a focus to specific issues or topics or short-term projects, to report recommendations for consideration by the full commission, and typically, once making their report, expire. A work group tends to cease to operate after it reports its findings or recommendations. Here, there is a permissive opportunity for work groups to provide notice of their meetings and to allow attendance and observation by the public. However, because these groups are constituted of less than a quorum of the body and are not given a standing long-term responsibility, they are not bound to the open meeting law. Again, that doesn't mean the commission can't choose to provide notice and the opportunity for the public to attend and observe. I want to point out there is nothing in the draft bylaws that would prohibit that. It is this body's choice. So the primary differences in the bylaws between committees and work groups are as follows. Committees must be pre-approved by council with a defined long-term purpose related to the core function of the commission. Once formed, committees must be composed of current commissioners. They are subject to the bylaws, including the requirement that meetings conform to the state's open meeting law. Decisions or actions by committees are taken by a majority vote of the members and are essentially formal recommendations to the full commission for its consideration. Work groups are formed by the commission to give attention to short-term assignments and projects. They must be composed of commissioners less than a quorum of the full body. They cease to exist once they report their recommendations. Work groups are intended to enable the body to be nimble and flexible in addressing current topics of interest or very time-sensitive needs without the hassle of formal requests to the council to establish a new committee, which takes time to amend the bylaws and create those formal structures. In response to some criticism about the current use of work groups, I would say that the distinction between a work group and a committee is not merely one of description. A committee has an ongoing or even permanent function assigned to it directly related to the core functions and the operating needs of the commission. A work group is a temporary body, also composed of less than a quorum. Because both are less than a quorum, the open meeting law would apply to committees, but not to working groups. That same applies to the city council. The open meeting law applies to the council and its committees, but less than a quorum of the council or any committee of the council may meet and not trigger the open meeting law. The goal in these bylaws is to prescribe the operating framework and key distinctions between committees and work groups should the council authorize any request for committees by this commission. And I will go on record saying I anticipate that the council will look favorably on any request by this body to establish standing committees. Although I don't speak for the council, I think they will be favorably inclined. Article 9 requires the commission to adopt an annual work plan that sets forth its planned activities for the year. The work plan may include, by way of examples, the planned review of police department policies and practices, programs, trainings, internal controls, collective bargaining agreements, and other related matters that will be considered during the year. Details about planned community outreach activities and events during the year, and plans to review and consider improvements to the complaint investigation process and the policies that build in safeguards for community members who are vulnerable to retaliation. These are all listed within your formal powers. They would all be appropriate topics to include in a formal work plan. Article 9 also provides that the Commission, by official action, may identify, prioritize, and refer requests for studies or research to the Civil Rights Department in support of its annual work plan and official functions. This also comes from your enabling legislation, is just also codified here. Any such request must identify the subject, the purpose, scope, and must be within the Commission's jurisdiction and clearly tied to a component of its approved work plan. Article 9 provides that requests for routine information, data, reports, and similar matter which exist or which require only minimal staff time to acquire, assemble, or produce from existing sources, all of which is classified as public data under the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act, will be processed by the Civil Rights Department and distributed to the full commission so that all commissioners have the benefit of that information or data. Furthermore, if the commission requests study or research that is narrowly defined and is estimated to require no more than 20 hours of staff time to complete, then that shall be processed by the Civil Rights Department and distributed to all commissioners. If, however, the Civil Rights Department determines any such request requires more than 20 hours of staff time or exceeds the department's capacity and resources at that time, then authorization to proceed would require the approval of the mayor as the head of the city's administration. This Civil Rights Department is responsible for managing, processing, and responding to requests for studies and research, and the department may decline to respond to requests that fail to meet those requirements. Finally, Article 9 requires an annual report highlighting the major activities and accomplishments each year to be filed with the mayor and council. As I said earlier, the underlying goal of Article 9 is to draw stronger ties between this body and the mayor and the council by requiring both the annual work plan, which is forward-looking, and the annual report, which looks back over the year, to be filed so that we can have a good idea of what this body plans to do and has done. Some community feedback questioned the timing and processing of these mandated reports. I will note here that the current draft indicates the annual work plan should be submitted no later than May 15th each year. This was a governance work group position because it aligned with the date of the organizational meeting of this body originally. I will say that the goal for enterprise-wide reforms is to have these annual reports filed at the beginning of each year and to have annual work plans filed at the end of each year. So the CCPO, if it sticks with the current bylaws provision that says these will be done in May, will not be in alignment with the other 59 boards and commissions. I would like to encourage you to adapt your schedule to say that the annual work plan would be filed for January at the beginning of the year, and your annual report would be done in December, so that we have consistency across all of those bodies. So adjusting that deadline in Section A of this article would be my recommendation. The end-of-year report, as I said, is due in December, and that aligns with enterprise-wide timelines for all other boards and commissions. That means from a practical standpoint, the commission would need to adopt its annual work plan for the next year by its regular meeting in either November or December, and it would also need to adopt its annual report in that same time frame. So that would be the time to report on what you've done in the preceding year and forecast for the next year what you plan to do. In terms of process, all work plans and annual reports from all of the boards and commissions across the enterprise would need to be filed with the clerk's office, and the clerk is responsible for presenting those reports to the city council and the mayor. Reports would be made public records, accessible in limbs, and available to the public. I envision that we would be making those reports likely to the council's committee of the whole, which includes all 13 boards and council members, and exercises oversight over boards and commissions, so that there is a public record of all of those reports, not just CCPO, but all city boards and commissions. Finally, Article 10 provides how these bylaws may be amended in the future, essentially by formal action of this body making recommendations on changes to be submitted to the mayor and council for their consideration. The official bylaws would be filed and retained in the clerk's office and available for public access. That completes my summary of Articles 8, 9, and 10. I'm happy to respond to questions about those articles if there are any.
Any questions? Commissioner Green-Sherman?
I'm just noting the late time. I definitely have questions about these articles, and I very much appreciate that you, Mr. Carl, included the CUAPB letter of June 2nd and also the June 1st email from Chuck Turchik, which raised some issues. But I don't know how long it would take to answer these questions or to get them all out. I am going to make a motion that we can't stay here all night, and I do have some serious questions about the committees and the work groups and the annual work plan and how they tie into the ordinance. So I'd like to get some guidance from you and from the chair about the time it is and having sufficient time to ask those questions and to get answers on as to some of the things that were raised in this letter and other thing in the email, and other things that I have can reasonably be provided. I think that this is very important. The work here is exceptional. I appreciate all that's done, but there are some sticking points for me, especially in Article 8 and 9, and I do have just some other questions. So I would like to get some guidance on, do we want to proceed until all the questions are asked tonight, or can we put this over to the August meeting?
The captioner is only here for another 20 or so minutes, and we still have items on the agenda. So I don't know, Mr. Clerk, how you would like to proceed with questions, if they can be answered by email?
I would start by making a motion that we adopt them with the amendment that the city clerk suggested with respect to the timing of the annual report and the work plan, that it be amended to make that. Otherwise, adopt the bylaws tonight as proposed. We've had them available for 3 months now to review. So I think it's good to get this moving and vote on bylaws tonight.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion on that motion? Commissioner Green-Sherman?
It doesn't matter how long that this was provided to us. This is a public meeting. The questions that we have are being publicly conveyed. The public has a right to know if we have issues and concerns, and they are not privy to our emails. And then we also get into all sorts of quandaries about whether we put things in an email for violating the open meeting law. I think it would be highly, highly irregular for us to pass these bylaws without the opportunity to completely, thoroughly vet every question and every concern and pass them and say we're going to come back to them. We know we won't come back to them. And that I have some serious concerns that I've been raising for virtually the whole time that we've been on this commission about the open meeting laws and the work groups and how those are going to meet. There's questions about the work plans. I think to sit and say we've had these, the public doesn't know what our concerns are, and to shut this off and say let's just pass it, we'll come back to it again, you've all had plenty of time, I think that's a slap in the face to the public.
If I may add, to take it personal, we've had several months to review these, and the hope was that people would bring their questions, comments, and concerns previously, before this evening. The question was asked several times and by email to any concerns, any questions, please bring them up. And then we didn't have a meeting in June. I am also in favor of continuing with this motion and passing them today, while also recognizing that bylaws can change. Bylaws are a working document. And so I would just put that comment on the record. Any further discussion regarding this motion? Commissioner Clement.
I would also like to state that we did take emails from the public and go through those emails when we were in reviewings of the bylaws. So we did speak to the public that did decide to email us and review those questions, comments, and concerns when these bylaws were edited.
Any further discussion?
Yes.
Commissioner, 1 second, Commissioner Green Sherman.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stern by his hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just point out that dilatory motions cannot be used as an effective veto by any one member. So we vote no matter how concerned any one member is.
Commissioner Green Sherman.
I've been waiting for the presentation by the city clerk. He answered some of my questions already by just going through this. We've been waiting for this presentation, and not just for submitting emails. Some of the comments that are made in the emails are not addressed, and a simple question about whether they have been addressed or how they're addressed. The city clerk himself has said, I have an example, I have a recommendation for a change. And to say that everything is done by writing as opposed to open in public discussion is not what this commission should be about. We should be about having the city clerk go through, who made an excellent PowerPoint, made an excellent presentation, and in doing so, at least in my case, answered a lot of questions. Some still remain. And to say that we're going to just pass this, and you had this opportunity, we haven't had the opportunity to hear from the city clerk. We haven't had the opportunity to question it. It is 8:43. We have other things to do on the agenda, and I have questions, and I don't think passing this agenda, I'm sorry, these bylaws without being able to ask the city clerk in person, in public, the questions is appropriate.
So your vote is no. Can we move on with the motion?
Is there any further discussion on this motion? Commissioner Smith?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Gray and Sherman, I wonder if you could succinctly state your outstanding concerns so we at least have the benefit of knowing what they are.
They're around the work groups. I'm sorry, they're around the work groups and the committees, and some of the language that I find, I'm not sure if it's covered. So when, for instance, in the Article 8, under committees and work groups, when it says that nevertheless, any work group shall be permitted to provide notice of the meetings and to conduct any meetings in public at the discretion of the work group. What happens when a work group, which is operating as a standard committee, a standing committee, it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, and a work group is operating as a standing committee? What is the consequence of that work group? That's one question I have. Another is, it says Committees of the CCPO of any kind or form, whether standing or special, permanent or temporary, may only be created with prior authorization of the City Council. The City Council is right now, even though we certainly are not that concerned with it as a commission, they are proceeding on an ordinance revisions. And part of that is to determine whether committees and work groups. So is prior authorization only when the ordinance is changed? What other way is the City Council able to give prior authorization other than changing the ordinance? So that's another question that I have. So those are just two on committees and work groups that I have, and I haven't talked about the work plan.
Mr. Clerk.
Did you want me to respond to that? To the questions I think I heard raised under Article 8, starting with paragraph A, it talks about prior authorization of the City Council prior to creating special, permanent, or temporary bodies. That is not necessarily an amendment to the ordinance. The ordinance creates this body. It would be a recommendation by this body to amend its bylaws submitted to the council, and the council would approve that. That request would identify the body, its name, its functions, its purpose. We already know under the bylaws and the enabling legislation, any standing committee, whether special or temporary or permanent in nature, is going to be subject to the open meeting law, so those don't have to be provided. It merely is a request from this body, a recommendation requesting the authorization to create it. The council and the mayor agree, and these bylaws are amended. Then an updated copy of the amended bylaws is filed with the city clerk, and the body has created a standing committee.
And would prior authorization also be a change in the ordinance by the City Council?
The City Council, through the chair, I would say the City Council has total control over the ordinance creating this body. This body can certainly make recommendations on that ordinance at any time it wishes by formal action. We talked about how this body acts, but the council and the mayor could take action in creating changes to that ordinance without the recommendations or advice of this body. So the council has many ways in which it could act on the ordinance. This body cannot change the ordinance except to make recommendations or requests to the mayor and council, because the only ordinance-making power in the city, in the entire city, is vested in the council.
But if the City Council changes the ordinance to write in a police policy review and recommendation committee and a community engagement committee, then we don't have to go through the rigmarole of asking them to do it. They'll do that on their own. That would constitute prior authorization, yes?
Through the chair, that is one way that standing committees could be created. I assume this body would like to have some control over its own destiny and would make recommendations that we do want to take to work groups. We'd like to formalize those as committees, and the council would say yes, and you would amend your bylaws and create those committees. I don't think you want the council to establish committees in your ordinance. It's much harder to change. It's much easier for this body to maintain control by having its bylaws amended to create, change, alter, or amend committees over time, over many, many years. Looking out 15, 20 years from now, this body may not want I'm sorry, I don't know the acronym, Commissioner Shanfield, but the PPRR committee, it might want to be something completely different. To change it, if it's an ordinance, will require an entire ordinance process, which at minimum is 2 months. And 2 months is if the stars and planets are perfectly aligned and the mayor and the 13 council members completely agree. It usually is longer than that. Whereas a proposal to amend your own bylaws would be a formal vote by this body to request that you allow a change to our bylaws, and the mayor and council say yes, and you've changed your bylaws. So what we tried to do is anticipate that the mayor and the council need to say, yes, we think you have a business need for standing committees, but we're delegating to you the decisions about how many, what they do, what their requirements are, what they, how they function. They're just tying it that they get to have that formal request and approve it. That's it.
Thank you.
So what happens when a work group is operating as a committee?
One moment, Commissioner Green-Sherman. In the interest of time, it is 8:50. We have 10 minutes left for the captioner. We still have agenda items, and we have a motion on the floor. So I would ask that we vote on this motion, up or down, however you choose, and then we can continue on. So the motion on the floor, Commissioner Olson, will you please restate the motion?
Excuse me, a point of order. I asked 2 questions. The city clerk asked, can I answer them? And the second question hasn't been answered. So before we go on to the vote, I would like to know the answer to the question, what happens? What are the consequences when a work group is operating as a committee?
Commissioner Gurran-Sherman, do you have an answer for that question?
I
Mr. Clerk?
have an answer I can offer.
Okay, if you could, please.
The short answer is that it's a decision of this body. A member of this body would bring forward to the full commission and say, I believe that this is a standing committee. It's in the nature of a standing committee, not a working group, and we should make a request to the council to change our bylaws to make it a committee.
Okay,
It's for this body to decide all these things.
all right.
Can I make a point as well? We've always operated as a work group and never as a quorum. And we've discussed this multiple times when we first initiated this, and it was never, that was why we separated amongst, that's why some of you overlapped in different work groups. At the same time, some were removed from certain work groups, so we would not have that situation. It's considered a work group, it's called a work group. At the same token, we were not going to, on a case-by-case basis, decide if we were going to open it up to the public, because we wanted to have an opportunity to actually work. So, and I would have really appreciated as well if you would respect everyone's time and not continue to repeat to ask questions that things that we've already have answered.
But work groups are not just about quorums. It says in here, a work group is
But that's what you're trying to focus the question on,
address
if we were to create
specific
a
issues
quorum.
or short-term
Commissioner Grant,
You're
tasks.
hypothetically
Our work groups have been working on
I would
permanent
ask-
issues.
Excuse
But we're
me,
not in a
excuse me.
quorum.
I would ask you guys to, one at a time. We have a motion on the floor. Discussion has ended. We had a time frame for this report. Discussion has ended. I would ask that we vote on the motion, please. It is 8:51, and I want to respect the people that are working in the background to make this meeting happen, including the captains who leave in 9 minutes. The motion on the floor. Commissioner Olson, would you please restate the motion?
If I could get quick clarification from the clerk on what dates specifically we should change in the amendment. In Article 9A, it says May 15th for the work plan. That should be January?
Correct, Commissioner. It should be by January 1st of each new year.
Okay. And the other is the
Year end.
The year-end report. Yep. Due by the end of the year, December 31st of the year.
December 31st instead of December 15th. That's in Article 9B4. So with those two amendments, changing the date in Article 9A from May 15th to January 1, and changing the date in Article 9B4 from December 15th to December 31, the motion is to adopt the bylaws as drafted and presented.
There was already a second, so I would ask that the clerk take the roll.
Commissioner Lohr,
Yes.
Shanfield,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Clement,
Yes.
Gurran-Sherman.
I'm sorry, did you call my name? Thank you, no.
Stern,
Yes.
Williams Johnson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reeves.
Yes.
There are 9 ayes and 1 nay.
Thank you. We have bylaws that have been approved with the amendments as stated. Before we proceed, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to the governance work group and especially its leader, Commissioner Olson, for their work to shepherd these bylaws for us. We've had lots of good discussion about how this body operates and what is necessary to be successful in performing our official duties. I also want to extend the thanks of this body to the staff who have partnered with us to get us to this point. Thank you very much. With that, I'll reiterate what the clerk noted, which is that we will also be taking up draft rules to guide the conduct of our meetings in the next few months as a complement to these bylaws. The next order of business is new business, and we do have 2 items, but in the interest of time, it is 8:54, and I would wonder if we can entertain a motion to take the rest of the agenda items and put them on to the August 5th meeting.
Second.
Right, there's a motion and second to take the remaining new business items and put them on the August 5th meeting. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, I would like to add to
Commissioner
that,
Grant-Sherman?
that the ordinance, which was also amended to put under unfinished business, that would also go over to the August meeting.
Thank you for that clarification. So the 2 items of new business and the unfinished business of the ordinance conversation. All right. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Lohr,
Yes.
Shanfield,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Clement,
Yes.
Durian Sherman,
Yes.
Sturm,
Yes.
Williams Johnson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reeves.
Yes.
There are 10 ayes.
Thank you very much. It is now 8:55. I think that we are adjourned if there is no other business.
I would just like to thank the chair for running a very good meeting.
Thank you very much. We'll get this together, y'all. So thank y'all. Y'all have a wonderful evening. Everyone, thank you for watching.